Hello from Portugal. On behalf of the organizing committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Galp Open Days, 7th edition. This year, integrating energy transition is the theme. I would like to thank you for taking your time to join us, and we wish that you make the most of it. As it is customary, we are going to start with the HSE moment. This year, a contribution from Ian Travers. Ian, please, you're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to give you just a brief oversight of COVID-19. My name's Ian Travers, and I've been working with Galp for 18 months or so on risk management, but I've also been working generally around the world on COVID. So you'll have heard a lot about social distancing, personal hygiene, ensuring workplaces are kept clean, and all of the kind of physical measures to be put in place to make your workplace safe and support your safe return to work. But I just wanted to highlight one important part of that, and that is the anxiety and concern that employees and people will be feeling about coming back to work after we've been separated and in lockdown for such a long time. And I want to stress the importance of communication and talking. So I want you to think about, how you communicate with each other. What are you going to say when you've got concerns? How will those concerns be raised? What sort of feedback will be given to people if they have got concerns about safety in the workplace? And how open and listening will the organisation be when people make suggestions to make improvements? Because my experience of working in health and safety for many years is no matter how much you carefully plan and you think about things and you assess the risks, life always kind of changes slightly from that, so you'll not get it right first time. So be open to listening, be open to a conversation, a genuine thoughtful conversation about how people might be thinking, but also how things will be improved. And I'm sure you will be fine. So good luck in your return to work, and I wish you well. And hopefully I'll get to see you in person soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Important takeaways for these unique times that we are sharing together. Your message is most welcome. We will now initiate our agenda with the plenary session. It is my privilege to introduce you to Mr. Thore Kristiansen, the Upstream Business Chief Operating Officer, that will address this plenary. Welcome, Thore.
Good afternoon and welcome, energy friends, to the 7th edition of Galp Open Days. It's a special way to welcome you this time because we are actually going to do it completely digital and virtual for the first time. But unprecedented times call for unprecedented means of hosting a seminar like this. First of all, let me thank the organizing committee for their very dedicated and hard work in order to put this together, even under these circumstances. Secondly, a huge thank you to everybody that have turned in for this event. We are expecting that there will be something like 574 guests from something like 22 different countries, and representing some 90 different companies and institutions attending to this event. This, I think, is a new record for us, and we are very, very pleased that so many of you have found the time and opportunity to do this. 1 year ago, we were all welcoming you here in Lisbon, in the beautiful city of Lisbon, with nice weather and where we had the possibility to also interact in a more personal way than we are doing this year. But this year, we are struck by another unprecedented fall in prices in our business, and a COVID-19 that is setting unprecedented standards for how challenging an environment we are in. According to IMF, this crisis that we see today is completely unprecedented and even worse than the 1930 depression. For 2020, they actually expect that the economy will contract with some 4.9%, and actually hitting the Western world even more so than the emerging world. Whereas France, Spain, Italy and Great Britain is expected to have a GDP reduction of something between 10 and 12%. So we need to expect that this will also then take some time to recover. And in this context, it makes it even more important that we are meeting in this way in order to have time to discuss for how are we going to cope with this crisis in our industry. What remains a fact is that the world population is continuing to grow. The forecast is for almost 10 billion people by 2050. And this increasing population will need even more energy. And we need to make sure that we are able to provide this growing population with sustainable and affordable energy so that we can cope with the challenges. And let us just remind ourselves of some of the challenges. Only a few years ago, more than 1 billion people were without electricity. And yes, it is coming down, but even by 2030, EIA expect that almost 650 million people will be without electricity. We need to make sure that people get access to electricity and get access to the standard of living we have. And we need to do that in a sustainable and affordable way. Renewable energy will be a very important part of this increase in energy demand and an important contributor to the transition into a low-carbon economy. Still, the need for oil and gas will be significant also in many, many decades to come. But what we need to contribute with is that this energy is being provided in a sustainable, affordable, and environmentally friendly way. The main purpose for us today, to being here today, is that we will all of you like you to participate with us to debate. So how are we going to cope with a lower for longer price environment? What are the structural and sustainable changes we need to do within our industry? How can we develop and embrace a sustainable technology roadmap so that we can better cope with these current challenges? And how can we use innovation and ingenuity to challenge our traditional thinking so that we are working in smarter, more efficient and more sustainable ways? As you all know just too well, this is not unprecedented for an industry that we are facing crises like this. We have really just come out of one after the significant oil and gas price fall in 2014 and 2015. And then I think the industry showed its capability of turning around and putting in place very forceful actions to reinvent and to adjust its business so it was fit for purpose and where cost came significantly down. Now we were all looking forward to somewhat better price terms where the commodity were priced in a more comfortable way, if one can use such an expression. But then suddenly we were hit by this price war that put prices down to unprecedented levels. Yes, we even saw negative oil prices in the US where WTI was traded at a discount. That means that we have to continue these efforts we have undergone over the last few years to adapt and to adjust our business so that it's fit for purpose. What have we done in Galp in this aspect? Well, our first and foremost task was to make sure that we were protecting our employees, making sure that the majority of our employees could work from home. And some 96% of the upstream population in Galp has been working from home until the last few weeks. And now we have approximately 1/3 of the population back in the office in Reservoir. But we needed to do more. We had to significantly reduce our investments and our operating costs in order to make sure that we were preserving cash so that we could sustain our business. And we have achieved quite significant result in this aspect. We have reduced our investments with some 44% versus our original plan for 2020, making the capex reduction for 2020 in the order of around 350 million euros. And we have had to streamline our organization. We see that with the reduced activity level that we now will have, where products will be delayed and put out in time, where we need optimized product, where we need to make them more resilient and more robust, that we also need to do that with fewer people. So we are reducing and streamlining our organization in order to make sure we have an organization that is fit for the purpose. But we're doing that based on a uniquely and distinctive portfolio, where Galp's portfolio still is expected on average to grow with some 10% compounded annual growth rate from 2019 and until 2030, based on the assets we already have in the portfolio. And with the break-even that we currently see to be below $25 per barrel. So we have a strong portfolio. Now we need to continue to develop it, but in a pace where we make sure that the investments are fit for the purpose and for the income that we are generating in these tougher times. What we then have said is that, and the way we have adjusted our strategy is the following. We are focusing on resilience so that our portfolio remains very robust even in low commodity price levels. And as I said, we are now even below $25 per barrel. Secondly, we are focused on quality growth. We need to have assets, and we will only focus on assets that gives us high quality growth. Thirdly, we are focusing on assets that are contributing with cash generation so that we are providing sufficient self-funding for the development products that we have in the portfolio. And in addition, the upstream division in Galp also sees it as an important contributor to developing new business area like the renewable business, which Galp is also very focused on developing. As a part of the energy transition, where we will build a strong renewable business, and at the same time we will tilt our production from a more oily production over to a more gassy production as we continue to develop our assets, in particular Mozambique, where we are, as you know, are part of Coral South, which will be the first floating LNG facility in Mozambique, and in the next phase, onshore LNG trains, developing the very promising and prolific Rovuma LNG basin. And lastly, but not least, we make sure that we continue to have optionality in our portfolio so that we can swap and trade assets as we see them being fit for being able to contribute to higher level of profitability for the side of Galp. And we are doing all of this with the mindset that we also would like to contribute to a low carbon intensity overall in our portfolio. And we will also like to continue to make sure that we are investing systematically in R&D in order to develop our technical skills, making sure that we have always the access to the state-of-the-art technology. Currently, Galp are involved in around 22 different R&D projects, some of them being, I guess, known also to you. For instance, the Seismic Interpretation Advisor, SIAM, which we are developing in an R&D project in order to be better and faster to interpret our seismic information. We have also invested in AlphaSim, which is a multi-phase flow simulator to assist in our flow assurance efforts, and also in Pipacom and the associated ROV technology in order to detect the flooding in the annular part of the riser, and also to make sure that we have them are better equipped to test and to foresee stress corrosion cracking due to CO2. This is just to mention a few for you. So, I hope that you are going to find these days fruitful. We are going to miss to see you physically in Lisbon, but hopefully there can be another opportunity next year. In the meantime, we really hope that you can exchange valuable and useful information, that you can collaborate, that you engage in debate, that you get new ideas, that you develop your business insight, and that you find also inspiration to look for the sustainable solution in those challenging times where we are. And let us remember the Chinese sign for crisis also means opportunity. Let us therefore together find the opportunities for the development and growth of our business in a sustainable way. So I wish you the best of success, and I hope that the Galp Open Days of the 7th edition also will be very valuable for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thore. It's a pleasure, and it's really, in these unique times, a fact that challenges and opportunities, they go hand in hand. And to talk about opportunities, I'm looking forward to listen to Marco Ferraz. Marco Ferraz is our Upstream Innovation Lead, and Marco is going to present us the Galp Upstream Innovation Challenge for 2020. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Just sharing my presentation here. Thank you for your words. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Galp Upstream Innovation Challenge. Well, first of all, I would like to give you a brief background, just to start. As you may know, Galp has a strong commitment and track record with research, development, and innovation projects. Well, first of all, to fulfill our Petrogal Brazil, or Brazilian office, with the commitment with the Brazilian regulation, where we have full compliance, but also by identifying key technological partners and solutions in order to increase our knowledge and also increase our value capture. So far, over the past few years, we have built a solid and diverse portfolio with 22 projects ongoing by now, and 18 projects already finished. And this has an overall investment of more than 350 million reais that allowed us to obtain, first of all, advanced solutions, and some of these advanced solutions in challenging areas like the Brazilian pre-salt. All of this is selected according to key technological programs, according to Galp main drivers and main context. I'm going to show you just briefly some examples of very good projects that are still ongoing. If I could, I would show all of the projects, but unfortunately I don't have time for that. But still, I would like to take this opportunity to show projects, for instance, like AlphaSim, a flow assurance simulator that uses modern computational techniques, but also projects like Pipacom and RovScan that are projects that solve the challenges that we have with CO2 stress corrosion and cracking in flexible lines. Finally, another example, the SIA, the Seismic Interpretation Advisor project, which is an artificial intelligence application in geosciences that allows to use computer vision in seismic images and also transfer the knowledge from one interpreter to the other. But other projects that we have like the ANP award-winning hydrogas, and so many projects that have value to our portfolio. So, what is the Galp Upstream Innovation Challenge? The challenge itself, it's a call for project proposals. What we want is to start these project proposals with an early ideation process. So we want to bring all the ideas to the table, discuss those ideas with key partners, under a creative thinking environment where we maintain, of course, our scientific and technical rigor. We think that having this, we can look for new and improved technological concepts that are completely capable of addressing Galp context and also Galp's challenges. We have put together and selected some challenging themes that I'm going to show to you, divided in related drivers and with a very well-defined framework. And our objective is, of course, intensify value capture, always having an eye on energy transition. So these are the teams selected for this year with our team. First of all, we want to look at subsurface, where our key drivers are reservoir characterization and reservoir management with a special look for enhanced oil recovery. Also, the characterization of stress and pore pressure regimes that, according to our portfolio, is also a demanding task. On drilling and completion, well abandonment technologies and also deep water innovation is something that we are looking for new technological concepts, and also well equipment enhancement. On the side of project engineering, subsea gathering and processing, as well as maintenance and integrity. On the other side, we have production and flow assurance, of course, always looking for the optimization of our production. And also a very key subject that Galp wants to address is sustainability. Sustainability because we want to start walking towards net zero emissions in order to reduce our footprint, but always maintaining our operations reliability. Finally, digital, which is something that Galp has some tradition by now, under the development of different platforms using artificial intelligence, managing data, and also having solutions with hyper-automation. So, basically, what are we looking for? We're looking for ideas. Everything starts with an idea. Ideas for research, development, and innovation projects that can have a time span between 12 and 48 months, not more than that. We want to engage with Petrogal Brazil and ISPG in Brazil as well. And we're looking for projects that will start after the ideation will start on July 2021 onwards. This doesn't mean that if we have a good idea, we couldn't postpone the project start in order to mature some of the concepts, but still, this is our key goal. We're looking for new processes and new solutions that have a reduced time to market or reduced time to application. Basically, we're looking for practical results that we can apply in our portfolio. So, who can apply? Basically, ANP accredited institutions as well as Brazilian companies. Also, and we would like to mention that, visiting researchers from foreign institutions that are part of a specific project. So if you're a researcher based in any other country, but somehow you are part of that project, you can also be part of this challenge. And finally, we just want to mention that we continue to pursue full compliance with ANP regulation for research and development projects. So, how to take part in this challenge? First of all, one idea, like I said, everything starts with one idea. If you have a specific idea, please contact us on that email, galpinnovationchallenge@galp.com. Drop us an email and say, hey, I have an idea. In the next few days, you'll receive what we call the ideation package. The ideation package is a package of documentation where you have a very simple form where you will explain basically your idea, as well as rules and regulations for the call, the drivers and the context that I just showed you with all the framework, of course, and also the links for ANP regulation. Once you get that package, and once you put your idea into the package, you start formulating your proposal, you put your proposal together, you get back to us at galpinnovationchallenge@galp.com. So, finally, the timeline, just to show you where you are. Let me just put the laser pointer here to be easier. So, we're promoting the challenge today, and after the open days are finished, we'll start releasing our ideation package. Until mid-July, we'll have technical clarifications for anyone that has a doubt and would wish to contact us. And after that, project proposals or the submission of idea proposals go all the way to mid-August. We intend to, in mid-September, to notify the selected proposals, and after that, we can work in details specifically by filling up all the forms according to ANP regulation. Finally, once this is done, we have all the negotiation process available to start, and then we intend to start the project, as I said, in July 2021. But still, as you can see here, if you need to mature those ideas, please let us know, and we can postpone that project. We want mature ideas, a lot of ideas in the package, so we can start talking about projects. So that's it. This is our challenge. I hope you follow us and be part of this challenge. Just remember, Galp Innovation Challenge at galp.com. Please feel free to contact us. Our team will be here available for you. Thank you very much. Daniel, back to you.
Well done, Mark. Well done. I'm very excited by this opportunity. And I like you mentioned, what we have to remember at this point is an email address, Galp Innovation Challenge at galp.com, Galp Innovation Challenge at galp.com. We are looking forward to receive your communication. We are now concluding this first part of our event. This is the plenary session, and like in a physical event, we are all today gathered in the plenary to listen to introduction of Thore and then Marco. We are now going to move into the debate session. And the debate, it is my pleasure to introduce António Fonseca. António Fonseca is the Upstream head of HSE, and António Fonseca will moderate this debate with our partners and colleagues. So, António, welcome. I hand over to you.
I would just like to do a small, give a small information from the organization. First of all, good morning, everyone. And I'd just like to make the announcement that there will be a Q&A session at the end of this debate. You can make questions during the debate in the Q&A chat that you can find in the right side of your screen with the question mark icon. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, António.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Maria. I'm pleased to announce the 4 guests that we have today in the HSE debate. So we'll have with us Anderson Cantarino from BP Brazil. Anderson is graduated and master's degree in chemical engineering from the University Federal do Rio de Janeiro, PhD in energy planning and safety engineering from Universidade Paulista. He has been working at BP Energy in Brazil for 17 years and is currently the Environment, Safety, Health and Regulatory Compliance Manager. Previously, he worked at Petrobras, at Ivaba, and at the consulting firm Arthur D. Little. So, Anderson, welcome and thank you to be with us. We also will have with us Gabriel Ivaba from Chevron. Gabriel is a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering from Tulsa University, Oklahoma, USA. He has 34 years experience in oil and gas industry, including high-profile roles such as ACEPA HSE Committee Chairperson and Cabinda Gulf Oil Company as HSE Manager. Gabriel currently is based in Luanda in Angola. So Gabriel, welcome and thank you to be here with us. Our third guest, it is Luciano Scataglini from ENI. Luciano is graduated in chemical engineering and joined ENI in 1982. In 1996, he became safety manager of ENI Exploration and Production, based in Milan headquarters and supporting all ENI activities worldwide. In 2015, he was elected Senior Advisor for Safety, and in 2019, he received a nomination as Global Advisor for Safety and Environment, the highest technical authority for safety and environmental matters in ENI. In his career, he has developed several tools for risk management, process safety, management leadership, and emergency management. Luciano, welcome, and thank you so much to be among us. And our fourth speaker will be Pedroso Rodrigues from Galp. Pedro joined Galp in 2000 and is nowadays the head of risk at Galp. His function includes responsibility not only in risk, but also in insurance, cyber resilience, and health. Previously was CFO for the Exploration and Production Business Unit, and before that, CFO of Natural Gas Business Unit. He studied management and law and has a 26 years experience mainly in the energy sector. Pedro, welcome and thank you. So, thank you all to be with us. And we all know that we are facing an unprecedented time affecting our society. This is a global crisis affecting all geographies, all sectors, including naturally energy, our companies, and our lives. What we'd like to go and to start, it is to go around the table and have your impression and thoughts on what HSE mitigation measures are key for our sector to deal with this crisis and assure operations continuity without putting people at risk. So, Luciano, if you could start giving your thoughts and ideas on this and experience, of course, would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I think that the basic rule for our sector now is to maintain the energy supply while ensuring health and safety of workers. And also at the same time be resilient to different consumption regime and to the increased price of oil. So, in my opinion, the main mitigation measures in this scenario are a strong preparedness and contingency plan, first of all. Then limit the preventive maintenance to safety critical element, while the corrective maintenance could be applied to the rest of the items in order to reduce hours of work over equipment. Suspend the new developments and rely on existing facilities, existing assets, and also suspend in particular the simultaneous operations in order to prevent movement from or to the drilling rigs. Then reduce the number of manned platforms. We in Italy, we have very few manned platforms with a lot of satellite platforms that are manned. So we reduce people in the manned platforms, and the other platforms are monitored from the mother platform, the hub, and also from the shore. So another measure is to duplicate the control of this kind of plants, both from the mother platform and from the shore. Then, of course, reducing the people on board, prolong the shift period, reserving some rooms in the offshore facilities for eventual quarantine period, arranging for single bedrooms in order to avoid to increase the distance, also to pre-confine the staff before accessing the remote locations in order then to be sure that when they go to the remote locations they are safe. Extend the smart working period, for example, to non-shift and non-core activities, but at the same time protect the teleworking facilities from cyber attacks. Train people on hygiene and personal protective equipment, and control also to prevent misbehaviors, also by applying some disciplinary actions. Of course, ensuring the energy supply is a short-term target. So, for this reason, the manager and the professionals that deal with the energy supply should be protected, their health status monitored, and at the meantime, they should have their movement facilitated even across the national borders. So more or less these are the main measures that I see are necessary in this period.
Thank you, Luciano. Anderson, I know that despite your role in Brazil, you also have strong links with regulatory authorities. So appreciate if you could also give us your view on this subject.
Okay. Thank you very much. In name of BP, I would like to thank the organization of GAP Open Day to opportunity to participate of this debate with our distinguished colleagues from GAP and Chevron. It's a great honor for me. Thank you. I would like to start talking about what BP has been doing about the COVID-19, and after I will talk some regulatory. And from start, our approach is centered in three key principles: protecting people, protecting communities, and protecting finance. This means that the staff have to adapt the way they work in some capacity, for sure. For many, it means a rapid switch to home working as countries around the world implement the quarantine conditions. And thousands of BP workers are still in the front line. They are working in the platforms, in the refineries, and in retails around the world. And we took some key measures, very aligned with what Luciano said before. I just would like to complement some information. One important point that we're taking is implementing social distancing, for not only for the staff in the offices, but in the front line as well. The scale is from 14 to 28 days, as Luciano said. We extend the rotations. The operations scale back to the basic tasks. In fact, activities to protect the health and the safety. For regulatory point of view, I can provide an example for Brazil. Since we started COVID-19 in March, was started the decrease of pandemic in Brazil, several regulators asking for new information for oil companies. And some informations starting be very tough to be attended. I can provide one example from the Anvisa. Anvisa is the Brazilian Health Agency, and they request to monitoring twice a day by a medical certificate every employee of oil companies to check the health. And just to have a number in mind, we had around 50,000 workers in oil industry in Brazil. And to do that, we will need at least 10,000 medicals to attend this required. It's amazing. So we are working with the other companies. Galp was included for sure, in Brazilian Petroleum Institute to negotiate and inform and the environment health agency that it's not feasible to do that, and not add great value to have this monitoring twice a day. So it's an example to working closely to the regulatory agencies, and we are successful. They not request anymore to do that, but there is other measures that we are attending. And the great point here is working together in an association of petroleum industry on the all the companies that work in Brazil are aligned to have the best result attending the regulation. Thank you, Antonio. That's it for me.
Anderson, thank you very much. It is our pleasure to have you with us. Now I would like to hear the opinion of Gabriel, that is in another geography, is in Luanda, to understand what BP is doing on that and what are difficulties that they are facing worldwide and specifically in Angola.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Just to add, I know to your introduction there, I happen to be also the incident commander for the COVID response for Chevron in Angola. So I've seen a lot, and with a pleasure to share. Like the other speakers already mentioned, When we step back, really we kind of divide this into three buckets for to keep the workforce, health and safety during these challenging times. It's kind of the what we call pre-entry to the workplace, which basically the basics, medical screenings, including thermal screening that pretty much everyone have seen around. But then there is while you are at the workplace, and again those measures some already been mentioned, social distancing, PPEs, the masks, hand hygiene, sanitation, disinfection. But really the key, what I would call as ongoing to really keep us safe and also minimize disruption to the industry is really the testing capability, including consumables, and also the facility treatment facilities and contact, tracing of contacts. So, but I think the testing here is key. And aside from the measures which we have done, this social isolation before we mobilize people, especially in the offshore environment. But to sustain it's very challenging, not sustainable from a cost standpoint. This is something we did not plan, and really the testing is the key that will allow us to minimize some of these 2 weeks or more of social isolation. If you can do on let's say 5 to 7 days testing, then when you negative results, then you can mobilize to the workplace. I think that's really a more safeguard, sustainable safeguard that will guarantee that our workforce is safe, healthy, and also minimize disruption to our operations.
Okay, Gabriel. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if you wanted me to also touch base on the regulation side of things. So
we can go there in the next round, okay. Please. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pedro, good afternoon. I also would like to have your view on what were the key mitigation measures to ensure our operations continuity without putting people at risk.
Hello, Antonio. Hello to all. So at Galp, we have started to look into COVID at the end, let's say middle of January, where we have made a meeting with the General Health Director in Portugal to have an evaluation. We have a think tank of risk from most big companies in Portugal. We have had a meeting and a long discussion of almost 3 hours, a very open discussion with the General Health Director in Portugal. We have started assessing this nowadays pandemic, and we brought the measures into the company well before they have been implemented in Portugal through the law. So, but what I think is very important, and we did along these 3 months or 4 months, is exactly the following that I wanted to share here. The first thing important for us was safety of our people. It was always a learning process. Communication was fundamental during all this process, and also our cyber resilience and enforcing our cyber, let's say, our cyber policies. So from the beginning, we started doing a twice daily crisis management cabinet, where we assessed all main points. From there on, people started going home on the 9th of March, and so roughly 50% of the company, and we installed a lot of safety measures in the company. And on the 16th of March, everybody was already at home, and we have been able to put roughly 2,300 people at home, let's say from one day to the other. And so we think it was very successful, even the way people started working remotely. After that, we then started deconfining on the 8th of June. And nowadays we are following a protocol of 1/3 of the team every 15 days. So again, to have our people safe, this was always our main aim, and to reduce risk. On top of that, we have put together our continuity plan and worked very closely with all our partners so that everything went straight. It was defined that the risk department was the one who was being responsible to manage all this situation, and it has been done, and we still keep our crisis meetings, but now just twice a week. So, and we are following up so twice a week with all the executive board members and most or a lot of the first line management, and also specific people within the company. And this has been very successful, I think, because of communication, because it gave us a way to communicate with everybody and to reach every single person. And that's what I wanted to say about that.
Okay, Pedro. Thank you very much for your comments on this interesting and important topic. So this was the first question to the all participants. I would like to remember the audience that you may ask questions that will be answered at the end of this session. So if you have anything that you want to be raised on this, please feel free. It's not every day that we have people with such an experience and knowledge that we can ask our doubts on such a crisis like this. So feel free to ask your questions. So the next question that I would have, and I would like to hear from Luciano his view. It was, how do you see the cooperation between oil and gas companies have helped in defining the best HSE practices to deal with this crisis?
Yes, we have monitored the situation with all the other oil companies within a committee established by IOGP, the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers. We meet twice a week, and we can share our initiatives or news, what else. IOGP is also publishing some guidelines for this specific subject, and one of these guidelines refers to the quarantine period and the COVID testing that is suggested for all the oil companies. And in particular, IOGP statement is that the quarantine period is useful because if a person cannot have any symptoms during this quarantine period, it can be assumed that it cannot infect others when they come back to work. There are some different opinions in terms of testing, because we have two types of testing. One is the swab testing, and the other one is the antibody testing. And both of these two have some pros and cons, so that the companies, not all the companies are in agreement with the IOGP view. In any case, there is a debate on this issue, and particularly the principle that emerged from all the oil companies to carry out a sort of risk assessment before deciding what is the best tool to adopt for testing. A risk assessment should be based, in my opinion, on specifically on the behavior of people, because as we know, the behavior of people is different. There are some people who behave in a prudent way, so that they comply with all the measures that are defined by the authority, and in this case we can be sure that they will be will have the low risk to infect others. Other people are more flexible in applying these rules, so that it is important, in my opinion, before carrying out this kind of risk assessment, to invest some supervisor and manager also to control the behavior of people, so that especially contractors, people and subcontractors, in order to be sure that we can isolate the case that can be suspect, and we can decide to put these guys in a quarantine period and to perform the test before accepting to the site. So this is mainly what I gained from the meetings with the other representative of oil companies. We have two committees in IOGP. One is the health committee, the other the safety committees, and both of them meet regularly in order to share some views, some information. But at the moment, this is the status.
Okay, thank you, Luciano. Anderson, I know that BP is also part of IOGP, but I'm aware that in Brazil there are several forums where the oil companies meet together to find what are the practices to put in place. Also, we saw this crisis starting and this pandemic starting in Asia, coming to Europe, and now moving and affecting strongly Brazil. So, how are you seeing the cooperation between oil and gas companies in defining practices to deal with this? Have you learned from what is happening here, or what happened here starting in Europe? When this arrives to Brazil, how do you manage?
Okay, Antonio, thank you very much for the question. I provide the perspective that we have in Brazil. Currently, I work as a HSE coordinator of IBP. IBP, it's Brazilian Petroleum Institute. This institute congregates around 33 oil companies working in Brazil. It's important to inform that last year, Galp is the coordinator, it's Joanna. She made a huge work for us in IBP. And currently, after the COVID situation, pandemic, in IBP, we had developed the manual for office returns, and this includes tips to consider before to return to the company activities, personal care in house, and going to work, general cleaning recommendations, guide for communication and relationships, as well as tests that could be performed in the workforce. And right now, we are also developing all the best practice guide for the operation offshore that will be issued probably at the end of this week, with contribution of several companies that work in Brazil. I can mention BP, Equinor, Exxon, Galp, Petrobras, Shell, Total, and others. And this guide includes procedures to be accomplished before embark, working the platform, and after disembark. And as you said, it's a very important cooperation. I believe that the competition between the companies should be in the sales, in the geology, but not for safety. So we're working together to improve the practices and share experiences. That's it for Brazil, Antonio.
Do you believe that these safety measures that are being applied are dependent of the geography, or more or less they are the same wherever we are or wherever we operate? So basically, what can we learn from one country to another?
Very good questions. I believe that each region has our peculiarities that require specific measures. But the basic safety is applicable, in my opinion, in our regions. I can provide the example of BP. BP business and regions are flexible to define measures to assure the best results in safety. However, when we start the pandemic, of course, it started in Asia, and we contact our business in Asia to take the lessons learned and the preventive measures. And we start using as lesson learned and starting applying the regions. Even the regions has the basic safety should be implemented. I can provide some examples from North Sea, for example. North Sea, BP has made a special thing that I believe that is very nice, that commissioned especially Sikorsky helicopter to repatriate North Sea oil and gas workers suspect to have coronavirus. And this helicopter is not available only for the BP staff, but for our operators in that region. And they had special features, including waterproof seats and floors to help post-flight deep cleaning. And they had a medical on board in every flight. For Gulf of Mexico, for example, they create a safety passage project that includes dedicated safe haven hotels, a BP-approved car services, mobilization of the staff earlier than normal, and other key measures. So we are flexible in the regions, but I believe that the basic, as mentioned, like social distancing, testing, the isolation of the people, self-isolation, is general for our business.
Okay, thank you very much, Anderson. Gabriel, I would like to hear your opinion on this. How this I know that Chevron is a worldwide company with operations in several countries. So I would like also to see your opinion and to hear your opinion on how safety measures are dependent of the geography and what you are learned from one country to another to put in place there in Angola.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. Yes, I think we all would agree that safety across the borders, this is from when you're talking processes, procedures, but I guess when it comes to applicability, one thing certainly a culture component that's really it's integral part how as one system works. And that's from background of the people, from education, how people learn. Some it's easy to have handouts. People can read. People watch the news. Where other cultures, you really need to have meetings, explain. People are willing to hear directly from their leaders. So I think that component of a culture has impact how people learn and how those procedures, processes are implemented on the ground. Certainly, Chevron, for example, as enterprise, we have common, CMT develop what we call general guidelines and processes but then we customize at the site or at BUs where it's applicable. But for the most part, it's all applicable. But one thing I want to just I would like to share here from as industry working together here. Good example in Angola, we have the ASEPA, which is the association of all the operating companies in country, either IOCs or NOCs, and we were able to create a task force that really have helped to operationalize some of the presidential decrees and some of the regulations coming from the government. We were able to help the government, in some cases influence the government that some of the measures we're putting in place are not practical for the industry. But industry has one voice. We were able to come up with bridging documents to operationalize what the government was putting in place, but also industry working together. Things like charter flights, the borders were closed, but we were able to allow to fly in, and was good at working together. So we pretty much, a company announced a charter, so we'll see how many seats are available. So then the other companies will leverage those flights, and as a whole, this was really a good way of managing and saving costs on the travel side, but also on the measures, like treating facilities. Instead of every company going out and setting up their own treating facilities, given the country infrastructure on the health side is very weak. So as industry, we were able to agree and make a joint treating facilities in case we would have number of cases within the oil industry. So, but again, working together, really, this was very helpful. So, in one voice, helping the government, and also coming up with common measures for the industry. But again, back to the region, the influence I see in the region is just the culture, the way we learn, and it's very critical as we pass the message we communicate. You got to take into consideration the regional aspect to be very effective.
Thank you. Do you believe that the experiences that you have in the past with other health crises, despite even with a lower dimension than this one, like the Ebola in Africa, make the region better prepared to deal with this type of events? So have you learned from the past, or have we learned from the past with not exactly the same, but with this type of events to be better prepared to face them now?
Yes, for sure. For Chevron in particular, the contingency plans we developed for this crisis were an add-on to contingency plans we had for the previous crisis, from Ebola, the most recent one, but even from the Marburg we had in the past, influenza in the past. So we were building on those contingency plans, and this really helped us to quickly mobilize, implement some things initially, including initial scaling down our operations and releasing especially the workforce considered vulnerable, that those previous contingency plans really helped. And again, as we continue to learn, we are updating our plans, and no question we are better prepared today for future because we've been learning from the past.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel. So I have Pedro. I would like to hear your view about what will be the near future, which means that what we heard about the new normal. How do you think that it will look like?
Antonio, from our side, our view is companies will have to be much more flexible. So most probably most companies will be having just a front line, or so the ones that are necessary to keep operations with the clients. So they will continue being on their on the sites. However, flexibility is what will be gained throughout this new normal. So people will have to be much more responsible. So they will have to work at home and work in the company premises, and they will have to switch between them. So this is also very important for leadership, because the leadership of all companies will have to trust a lot on what people are doing instead of controlling. So trust is very important here, and trust is something that I think is motivates people. And if you are trusted and you're responsible, I think it's much easier to be motivated instead of being controlled at every point in time. You will be responsible to do some activities, and you'll be asked for that, and for that work that has been put to your responsibility. And that's what I think that is very, very important, and that we are all learning from it. So one of it is flexibility. The other, I insist here again, is communication. So even people that used to be very shy and to stay at their places, now they have to communicate much more, so that their work gets seen and gets appraised by others within the company. On top of that, I think we have a very huge work to do in all companies in what's regarding cyber, because cybersecurity is on top of all agendas nowadays, and cyber attacks are being more sophisticated by the day, and companies have to be very resilient, because the cyber attacks will happen, and we will have to increase the resilience of each and other company that is working. And especially in companies that provide energy like our companies, it is hugely important that we focus a lot on cyber, because it is not only nowadays the premises of the company, but also everybody that's working from home. So again, people will have to be much more responsible, and they will have to report each and every problem that they are having, so that they can work more efficiently. I think that's
okay.
it.
Okay, Pedro. Thank you very much. Luciano, I would like to understand, how do you see also this new normal, how it will look like, and also what is the outlook that you see in terms of HSE, in terms of regulation, norms and procedures for the next, I would say, next decade?
Okay. So for the new normal, okay, I think what Pedro said is right. I think there will be some repercussion also in the social environment, in terms of occupation of people, because of course the crisis has demonstrated that there are some economical implications. So I think that the economy, the global economy, will be characterized by a lower lifestyle and lower labor demand, for example. In all countries, the enterprises have cancelled less qualified positions, so that one of the main issues is competency, and so the educational infrastructure for sure should be improved. So this is just a flash for considering also the economic aspects of this crisis. In terms of regulation, so I'm quite sure that the measures currently taken to face the emergency will have some effect on our culture in general. So probably the social distancing, for example, will become a good practice, and the virtual reality will become more and more a tool for training asset integrity management. So the oil companies that, for example, that have developed a strong digitalization framework will be competitive in this respect. The cultural change, of course, will be reflected in the regulation, in the good practice, in the HSE management systems, everything. Of course, the energy sector will become more and more strategic, and so the access to energy of the most vulnerable communities will be facilitated. The regulatory bodies of all countries should consider the energy sector as essential, and so I expect that the current moratorium that, for example, we have in Italy applied to our activities will be reconsidered on the basis also of the technical norms and regulations that cover the HSE aspects. You just look at the Safety Directive, Offshore Directive, for example. I think also, as I said before, that also the behavior of people will become a must. And so we can expect that some rule cover also this aspect, including some formal disciplinary action in case of violation. Of course, we need a more competent supervisor manager, because they should be also competent in this aspect, in controlling and managing also the behavior of people. A problematic issue is the testing of equipment, especially those carried out by the authorities, so that I see that there are some companies that have been developed some tools to carry out tests, and also to giving some certification to equipment at a distance, just using some equipment that is used in the workshop. So all these things will be changed. Some change is expected for sure. So this is just not just. I'm not sure, because I've not seen. It would be interesting, in my opinion, to see what are the accident injury trends of 2020 in this period. In my opinion, from my experience here in ENI, we recorded a number of incidents that is much less than last year. Especially we didn't experience any fatality, for example. So I think that at the end of the year, the statistics will show some positive results. Also because the activities have been reduced, of course. But I suspect that in the future they become a benchmark, and so that the future will be much more challenging than today, because we will have some benchmark that is very low. Okay, so this is my...
Okay, thank you very much, Luciano. Anderson, your view there in Brazil about this new normal, and what to expect in terms of regulations, norms and procedures in Brazil? What do you anticipate?
Okay, Regarding the new normal, I see the Luciano and Pedro what said and fully aligned. I believe that the people will have more autonomy in the new normal, and for the people that are working remotely, they will be more charged for the results than hours worked. So the responsibility becomes really important. I would like to add to the priorities. The priority has been changed. We had more people reflected, people that asking what's really important for the human being, for the planet. And for sure the companies are aware of it. And the companies are accelerating the required changes for this new normal. Relate with the for next decade in terms of regulation, what you see the more strict regulations related to people health, biodiversity, and climate change. This is just to mention some. And we know that now not our regulation currently has been proposed are completely reasonable or active improve the protection of health, safety, environment. And some of them can be very costly and bureaucratic. So I believe that the changes, the challenge that we have is to anticipate these changes in terms of HSE and be more proactive in our HSE positions and working together. In Brazil, for example, we're working together in IBP, but we had other associations, IOGP or IPICA, that we can propose best practice and share our experience in HSE subjects in order to improve the regulations and new requirements. The other point, not only Brazil, but I would like to share for oil companies, it's as we have in a transition moment, we know that we are very good as oil companies in HSE regulations to attend, and we have high standards. But we need to do the same of excellence for alternative energies like hydrogen, electric vehicles, wind and solar as well. And we need to get this expertise as soon as possible. That's it for me, Antonio.
Okay. Anderson, there is, the Q&A is still open, but I do not resist to put one question that came, and I think that fits very well here. That is, in all our companies, we have a lot of employees in teleworking. So the question is, how have employees react to this new way of work, the teleworking? And in your opinion, and I'm reading, in your opinion, in a long-term vision, which are the benefits, penalties for a company to implement teleworking as a rule? 2 days in the office, 3 at home, or something like that. So how do you see that? Because in a way, at least what I see it is from day to night, we put thousands of people working remotely at home.
Yes, you're right. And the flexible work has moved from being an employee perk to an employer preference right now. And I can see an example in Brazil. It's a public announcement by Petrobras. Petrobras will put 50% of the office staff in remotely work, in telework. And here we had an implication for the regulation, because according to Brazil regulation, if you work remotely, the company remains responsible for safety of these people. And of course, this can be valid when you working for your computer or mouse or something, but to work in the safety of your house, of the house of the people, become very hard to take companies to maintain the safety. However, in the point of view of the people, we made a survey in the BP in Brazil, how they are feeling to working remotely in home. And 96% feel better. Even there is a challenge to working with kids, there is dogs, and there is other tasks than normal, for sure. One very friend of mine, they say, "Oh, I should stop my call because I need to help my wife to make the lunch," for example. And you're working in the office, of course, you lunch in the restaurant. But I believe that the people it's adapting. The big point here is the connection, the technology, the use of technology, and as Pedro said, this has become very important, the cybersecurity for the people working there. But in general, the people, it's adapting very well to working remotely, but remains the challenge for the companies to become safe or make safe to working there.
Okay, Anderson, thank you very much. Gabriel, I'd like also to hear your opinion and your view in this new normal, and also your opinion about how the employees react when working in teleworking there.
Thanks. Yes, this is really a very challenging times, but the good thing with the challenges also comes opportunities. So working home has become a great opportunity from a work balance standpoint. So employees really love that. At the same time, for the companies and Chevron in particular, if we were to implement that in long term, there really savings also come with that, where you may not need bigger office space, and you don't have to pay transportation to bring people from home to work and back. And in fact, it's from a risk standpoint, aside from monitoring what's happening on someone's home, but really, less traffic, especially for Luanda, where traffic is a nightmare. This is really can even help less traffic in Luanda. So in general, the workforce has been very pleased. Now, also has revealed some of the IT infrastructure that really there's an opportunity there because that's key for the connection of people to work online. Now, from the also another thing that came with that, what we have observed, you don't necessarily need all the people we had until this is really we're forced to reduce our workforce, minimize the risk, and we're finding that as Pedro and Luciano already mentioned, the HES performance has been excellent. So, for one, you have less people moving certainly, but it looks like people is also different mindset, if you will. It looks like paying more attention, and as a result, we're seeing a much HES, improved HES performance. Now, when it comes to the regulation, what we see, because in Angola in particular, the focus looking forward has been around waste management, especially norm, and also certainly the emission. There been some regulation around that. But unlike the developed countries, some of the underdeveloped, they rely heavily on tax revenue from our activities, and with reduced activities, with low price, that's really hits on the government pockets. So then you can expect coming out of this, for one, government going after the industry, typically it's kind of an easy target, reinforce existing regulation, but at the same time, looking ways to copycat some of the regulation in other countries that maybe was not this issue, would kind of still out there, not really to go and grab those. So we can see government going after learning from other countries where regulation that they can make some more tax revenue, then get money to fund the economy and other social investment. So we can see the future a big change, but again, some of the learnings, as Luciano mentioned, like social distance and all that. So no surprise that some of those will make into regulation for the future.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. So the clock is ticking. We are coming to the end. And in the question and answer, there are some questions, and I will go for the last question that we received. And I would like, Pedro, if you could give us your view on the question that we received, that is, in a scenario that the current pandemic endures more than 1 year, do you consider that the measures that we have in place will be sufficient?
So, as I told you at the beginning, this is always a learning process. So we are always learning and we are always adapting. We try to do it very, very quickly and to anticipate. And for now, we've been able to do it. We are also following every recommendation that is being issued and following a lot of sources, so to be at the front at every time. So, but answering your question, if this will be the new normal, and I think it will be until there is a vaccine, that is, it is not foreseen before the beginning of next year. And so I would say that until then, we will be continuing to do as we are doing today. We will probably increase the number of people that are at the office at the same time to, I would say, a maximum of around 50%. And we will be learning with this process and doing or adapting whatever is necessary to ensure that our people are safe. And that's our big aim, is we want Galp's people safe.
Okay, our time is thank you, Pedro. Our time is ending of this interesting debate, and I would like to thank all the guests. So I'd like to thank Anderson Cantarino, Gabriel Ivaba, Luciano Scataglini, and Pedro Rodrigues for your availability, for your time, and to be here and to share your learnings and your experience with all of us. So it was an honor for me. Thank you very much to all of you. I would like to thank also all the people that were joining and were listening and doing these questions and answers. Thank you for joining. Thank you for attending this 7 Galp Open Day. Please stay safe, be careful. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Excellent.
Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the energy transition session. We will now have 4 rooms running in parallel, all with a very interesting presentation, and you are free to move between rooms. At the end of each session, we will have a Q&A session. You can make the questions during the presentation in the Q&A chat that you can find in the right side of your screen with the question icon mark. As the chair of this session, we will have Antonio Fonseca. Antonio has 30 years experience in Galp in several areas, such as in refining, project management, engineering, and HSE, either at a corporate or at a business unit level. With more than 15 years in HSE, he has a wide experience in several HSE disciplines and in HSE management systems. Please welcome Antonio Fonseca. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. First of all, I would like to present you Charles Goedhals from Gaffney and Associates. Charles is a principal development planner who has been working from Gaffney Cline offices in Bentley, Hampshire, UK for the last 13 years. He has over 40 years industry experience, mainly concerned with onshore and offshore conceptual field development planning and project execution. He has expertise in techno-economic field development studies with a thorough knowledge of project definition on an international basis. Charles has been involved in numerous projects incorporating both onshore and offshore developments, from small marginal fields to complex reservoir developments, and has worked closely with a number of clients in small integrated teams, including subsurface, surface, financial, and contracts personnel. Charles, welcome, and without further delays, the room is yours for the presentation of carbon management for the hydrocarbon industry.
Charles, we cannot hear you yet. Charles, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear you yet. It appears to be on your side. The microphone is open on this side.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, so let me see if I can get back to where I was. Right, I was giving a very erudite introduction there, and I'm going to have to work out what I said. This afternoon's session is really to open some of the discussion about carbon management in the hydrocarbons industry, and to give some of the background to some of the technologies that are beginning to come forward. I'll start off by giving a bit of an overview of why this is important, and then move on to some of the technologies. I'm aware that my colleague will be dealing with some of the other technologies in the following session, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So the agenda for this afternoon, I just want to start with some facts. Hydrocarbon use in recent years has been changing already. We have the Paris Agreement of 2015, which is very important in terms of carbon abatement and carbon management.
Charles, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but could you please share your screen so that we can see the PowerPoint?
By all means, I thought I had actually done that. Let me just double check. Is that?
It should be a button at the bottom.
Yes. As far as I can make out here, the screen is being shared. Are you seeing nothing at all?
No, not so far, but we can share on our side as well.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I'll work off the version you have there. I presume I will not be able to control it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Just let me know when you want to change the slide.
Good. So in tackling this carbon management thing, I'm aware that there are a number of opinions around at the moment about how important it is, how important it might not be, how good the science is about climate change and the carbon element into it. I'm not going to get into those, although I'm quite happy to discuss them if people wish to at some point. I'm just making the point that what we have here is a situation where there is a consensus amongst politicians and many other people that we have to do something about the amount of carbon that is being emitted at the moment, in the form primarily of carbon dioxide. So if we could have a look at the next slide, please. Hello? Can you see the second slide?
Yes, we are seeing the second slide.
Okay, good. Thank you. Some continued feedback would be very good, because I have absolutely no idea what you can see that in. So these two graphs here indicate the view of carbon of energy usage, firstly, in the top right-hand corner, in terms of exajoules per year. And you'll see from that the forecast at the time was that energy use would peak in the sort of 20 to 25 range, and that also the renewable part of that is due to increase considerably. And this is borne out by the fact that 2016 was the first year in which investment in renewables exceeded that in hydrocarbon generation for the first time, and it has just continued to grow since then. If you look at the second graph, the IEA latest estimated actual emissions, and you need to understand here that these are estimates. There is no accounting mechanism at the moment that is fully functional. You will see that in 2019, in fact, that the carbon dioxide emissions peaked at around 48, I think it is, million tons, gigatons of CO2 a year. So you can actually see that hydrocarbon emissions or carbon dioxide emissions are actually peaking at this stage. It's flattened off in the last number of years, so something is definitely happening. And the other thing that is happening, of course, is that there is considerable pressure on all industries to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions. Can we have the next slide, please? Do we have that yet?
No, not yet. Yes, it changed now. Yeah, it changed.
It's there now, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. The big change here was the Paris Agreement in 2015. And there were a number of commitments made in that. The first commitment, there was a lot of confusion about what commitments were actually made to, which is why I'm spending a little time on it. The objective was to limit temperature increase to a maximum of 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, with a target of 1.5 degrees by 2100. This involves the emissions peaking by 2050 at the latest. One of the commitments that was made was to mobilize $100 billion per year for carbon abatement. That was followed up by what's known as the Katowice package, which is a package of pre-digested policies, procedures, and guidelines for governments to adopt. The actual Paris Agreement itself was signed by 190 countries, and the projection even then was that a significant change would need to happen around about today, 2020, or around about now. It was recognized even then that carbon removal from our environment is a key part of the projection. If you look at the diagram on the right, there is a path which is what we would have in terms of gigatons a year under the current do-nothing situation. And then there are two lines for abatement. The one is for the 2 degrees limit, and the other one is the path to 1.5 degrees. And you can see that carbon removal is a key part of that reduction to the 1.5 degree C target. One of the things you'll notice as well here is that in 2015, when this projection was made, the target or the projected emissions, or the estimate of emissions, global CO2 emissions, was something below 45 gigatons. So we are somewhat above that, and I have no idea at this stage, because there are so many different sources and so many different estimates, whether this is a measurement problem, whether it's an estimating problem, or whether we really have emitted a lot more than people thought at the time. If we could go to the next slide, please.
It's already there.
Okay. This is the big stick. The EU has launched the Copernicus project, and the aim is that by 2025 there will be open access to CO2 concentrations worldwide on a 2-kilometer resolution basis. The picture that I've selected here comes from the Copernicus website itself. It's about it's indicating what they expect to achieve through simulations. And you can see their large cities, just to give some orientation. Berlin is the one in the center of the picture. And then a number of plumes of red, where there's something like a 7 ppm increase in CO2, and you can see the plumes there. Now, so by 2025, we should have satellites monitoring CO2 emissions on an ongoing basis, continuous global monitoring, with open access to NGOs and organizations with environmental interests. Now that is one part of it. The other part of it is that there are already a number of satellites up there which are monitoring methane emissions and carbon monoxide emissions and various other things. Carbon monoxide, because it's slightly easier to detect, and also nitrous oxide emissions as well. So the window of opportunity is closing. It's not going to be long before people will find themselves having to explain, and that's the simple reality of the situation we face. If you can spot a power plant in Germany, you can certainly spot an FPSO offshore, and that, of course, raises some considerable issues for existing facilities. If we go to the next slide, I'm just going to give a very, very brief overview of some of the technologies or the areas of technological improvement.
There already.
We have it. So
yeah.
if you think in terms of carbon abatement technologies, there are three main areas of interest. The first and the most difficult, I think, is direct air capture. This is because you're trying to capture a chemical, a compound, a molecule that is at the level of 400 parts per million in the atmosphere, and you're trying to do it cheaply. And that's not an easy thing to do. There are a number of particular technologies, which I'll go through in a second. But just to keep with the overview for the moment, the second major group of technologies are what are known as point source capture technologies, where they are deployed at major emitters like power stations and cement plants and refineries and other point sources. Now, this is what my colleague will be talking about, so I'm not going to get into that too much. And then the third main area is the area of pre-capture, where you remove the carbon in advance of the process that you are completing. So I'll spend a few minutes on that. There are two main technologies there. If we just go back to talk about direct air capture for a moment, there has been a pilot project in Canada, a very successful pilot project based on an enzyme process. It's a proprietary process. It has been subsequently bought out by one of the major construction, engineering and construction companies. There are solid-based direct air capture technologies which are really at some laboratory level, but there are one or two early pilot plants. I'm being a little vague about these because they are not terribly well defined at this stage. Some of them are covered by patents and the rest of it. There are liquid-based technologies, and I'll talk more in the next slide about the potassium hydroxide system, which is the one which I think is most developed at this stage. However, all of these, all of these direct air capture technologies are aiming to reduce the energy needs of the plant which is doing direct capture, and of course the more diluted the carbon dioxide, the more difficult it is to do. However, direct air capture is an absolutely critical part of the overall capture technology spectrum, because it is likely that there will be small-scale distributed sources of CO2 and mobile sources of CO2 until well into the future, and something will need to be done about that. The point source capture, as I said, will be dealt with by colleague Jane in a few minutes. The pre-capture technologies, I just want to touch on very briefly. Pyrolysis. Methane becomes unstable at about 300 degrees centigrade, and at 1,000 degrees centigrade can be induced to dissociate completely. And it produces pure hydrogen and solid carbon rather than carbon dioxide. And this is a very interesting set of technologies. There are one in the diagram at the graphic at the top right, which uses nickel and bismuth as a bath, a molten bath through which the methane is bubbled. But there are also other technologies using molten tin and others. And the idea is that the methane bubbles through, the carbon is dissociated, comes off as a solid, and the methane drifts off, the hydrogen drifts off for use. Now this has immediate application in the sense that there are already plans to introduce up to 10% of hydrogen in national grid or Europe-wide grids of natural gas. And the other thing about it is that the solid carbon actually has a number of uses. One of the more interesting ones is as an alternative to nitrogen-based fertilizers, which seems to be creating a lot of interest. Oxy-fuel technologies have been around for a while. It's the second graphic, lower graphic on the right-hand side. And here, the idea is to combust the methane or the hydrocarbon in a pure oxygen. That on its own would raise the working fluid temperatures way above anything our current metallurgy can handle. And so what is done is that the pure CO2 that is produced as a waste product is actually used as the working fluid. So in creating the CO2 in the combustion process, an excess of CO2 is produced and it's circulated, so it adds to the circulating fluid, and a 7 is drawn off to offset that. and this is a technology that is in operation at the moment. Siemens has one. There are others around that have been talked about for, I think, 20 years, as far as I know. The main problem, of course, is that the extraction of the oxygen is also an expensive process. But those are both very, very interesting longer-term technologies. What I'd like to do now is just focus in the next slide, if you could put that up.
Charles, you have 10 minutes.
I think it's there, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So this is the first direct air capture process that I have seen, and there may well be others, and if there are, and there are people that are offended by me putting this one up, I do apologize for that. It's a fast-moving area. This particular process is very simple. It uses a potassium hydroxide agent to contact the CO2 in the air to produce potassium carbonate. The potassium carbonate is then reacted with calcium hydroxide to form calcium carbonate, which is then slaked in the usual cement slaking process to regenerate the potassium carbonate to potassium hydroxide again. So a fairly simple process, you would think. However, if you look at the graphic on the right-hand side, this is the graphic produced for this process has been through a pilot plant already and functions. All of the key technologies have been proven to function. But the diagram on the right-hand side is the overall flow diagram for such a process, and you can see that it's actually a fairly complex process. I'm not going to go through all of the details of it. It takes a little while to work it out, and I don't think I have the time myself then to go through it. But the impact of this is that a 1 million ton per annum capture unit produces 500,000 tons per annum of CO2 and fuel use, which it captures as part of the process. The pilot plant has been followed up with an industrial scale design, and it's estimated to be about 800 million for the first unit and 600 million for the nth unit in the US. They claim $94 to $252 per ton of captured CO2, and I think the ambition would be to get it down to 90 or lower. And as I said, it's not got to a pilot level, but it's a very, very appealing process from that point of view. At this point, I think what I'd like to do is hand over and ask if there are any questions, see if there's any interest in any particular areas, and take the discussion further as we can.
Charles, thank you for your presentation. We have two questions. One is, what are the main constraints that you see for the development of this project?
The constraints for development of the carbon capture technologies.
Correct.
I just want to be absolutely clear on what I'm answering. The main thing is that anything we do to capture carbon dioxide adds to the cost of the energy we're producing. And I think that is the biggest limit that we see to implementing these things. It's going to take regulatory pressure to get people to spend this money and to get the retail market for energy to accept that those additional costs have to be paid. I don't necessarily think that's going to be easy, but that's where we are. That's what has to happen.
Okay. And the other question that we have is that if you see these projects being applied to new projects and facilities, or also to facilities already in operation?
I think my colleague Jane will probably answer the question better, but I think it's a great introduction to her. Both I think the nice thing about direct air capture, of course, is that it doesn't need to be tied to any particular plant. And it can be used for carbon offsets. So, for example, if you have an FPSO offshore and pressure is applied, then a direct air capture plant, along with other capture processes, for example, the popular one is planting of forests and the rest of it. Any offset technology. This is an offset technology, and that would work for that. However, I think that we'll see that the most effort will be put into either point source capture, either retrofits or new plant. It can be done with both. I have been involved in some of the work that's been done on retrofitting of plants, and I know Jane has a great deal to say about the technologies associated with that. Any other questions?
No, we don't have any more questions. So thank you very much, Charles, to be with us, for your time and for sharing your views and your knowledge. So thank you so much for attending and to share this with us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Jen Peatie will join us in a few minutes at 3:30.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hello.
Thank you.
That's great. Do you want me to share my screen now?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Great.
So I would like now to introduce Jane Peatie, Senior Advisor for Gaffney, Cline and Associates. Jane is a seasoned chartered chemical engineer with UK and international experience with Shell, BP, and recently as a consultant. After developing a solid grounding in process engineering, she moved into project and field development engineering and subsequently has more recent leadership experience as project manager and engineering manager. Her experiences encompasses a wide range of challenging developments from onshore shale gas to deep water subsea oil. After recently joining Gaffney Cline, Jane has been focused on carbon management studies to support Gaffney Cline's new and exciting practice. Jane is going to do a presentation on carbon management during the energy transition at scale deployment of CCUS. Jane, welcome. You to be with us, and the room is yours.
Thank you very much for that great introduction. Nice to speak to you all today. I'm coming from my home in Weybridge, Surrey, so hopefully my children won't pop in. I have asked them not to, so we'll get on. Anyway, what is carbon capture, utilization and storage? I'm going to talk about this specifically to do with an American study that was done recently. I just want to take you through a bit about how carbon capture, utilization and storage works in practice. So basically, it's a suite of technologies used to manage and capture carbon dioxide from stationary sources. That's so it can be converted into usable products or compressed and transported to a suitable location, where it can be injected deep underground for safe and permanent storage. Okay, so indeed, carbon capture, use and storage is not the only answer to solve the dual challenge that society faces of increasing energy demand and increasing emissions. However, it is a critical part of the answer, as renewables and batteries are. Understanding the complexities of CCUS requires an understanding of the supply chain. As my colleague Charles has probably told you, carbon capture can be applied to a range of emission types, both combustion process emissions and not even the air. This applies across a range of reference industries, such as ethanol, hydrogen, petrochemicals, and the various different types of power stations. Today, there's about 19 projects across the world in existence with a capacity of around 40 million tonnes per annum of carbon dioxide removed. There's a further 4 in construction and 28 in development. To underline the importance that society as a whole globally thinks about carbon capture, there's also 40 pilots and demonstration scale CCS facilities and a number of CCS technology centres globally. One IEA scenario suggests that the amount of carbon captured and permanently stored will rise globally up to around 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year in 2015. You can imagine that's an enormous sum, and it will require a huge level of deployment, an increase of 100-fold compared to what we currently have, to more than about 2,000 in operation by 2050. Reaching this scale will require around 100 capture facilities to be built each year, with a further total of about 400 storage sites to be needed, with 10 to 30 being established each year. You can understand the scale of the challenge. The US is the world leader in CCUS and is well positioned to deploy the technologies at scale, having already implemented a number of projects. Okay, so moving on to the study itself. So just to give you a bit of background on the National Petroleum Council. It's a federally chartered private advisory committee which is part of a number of large organisations and companies in the US. And the purpose of the council is to advise and make recommendations to the US federal government related to all aspects of oil and gas. So in 2017, the US Secretary of Energy requested a study from the NPC. The purpose of this study was to define the potential pathways for integrating CCUS at scale in the US over the next 25 years. Gaffney Cline was a key participant in this study. My colleague Nigel Genby, who's based in the US, was the alternative chairman on the coordinating subcommittee, as well as leading the roadmap to deployment team. So he was our firm was very well integrated into the study. In terms of what the methodology was for this study, basically they had to assemble costs to cover the entire value chain: the capture, transport and storage of carbon dioxide from all sources and fuel types. This meant that for each type of different industry, as I mentioned, ethanol, petroleum, petrochemicals, refining, power stations, they had to assemble typical costs for typical reference sizes. They did this by both using publicly available information, but also harnessing industry knowledge and expertise and actual costs. So, for example, we have some actual facilities built in the US, so they could use that. And National I've forgotten the name of it, Energy Technology Laboratory also has a great deal of input in for this. So, as well as that, storage and pipeline transportation costs were developed. In terms of storage, there's a number of different types of storage, mainly divided into geographical sectors, and costs for those different storage areas were calculated. In terms of pipeline transportation costs, the key thing is that carbon dioxide has to be in dense phase generally when it's transported, so it has to be at high pressure, and therefore the costs associated with that. Of course, a lot of the costs in the US are related to planning. Some countries will have less regarding planning, and of course, topography plays a major part in the development of pipeline costs. Luckily, there were a number of enhanced oil recovery opportunities available in the US, and those could be harnessed where available to effectively take the overall cost of deploying carbon capture at scale down. They were also needed to devise some realistic financing assumptions, which were needed to produce a 20-year cash flow and a fixed level of incentive over the period. Knowing that it's extremely important to ensure transparency for this sort of study, Gaffney Cline have provided a publicly available cost assessment tool and reference costs for the different CCUS applications online, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The NPC study is also fully available online, and you can read it and use it as you wish, as long as you refer to it. So you're actually able, in the nice situation that you can actually vary some of these costs and financial assumptions yourself, but also the method used to represent the output. I'll move on to the next slide. Right, so let's have a bit of a look at the outcome from the study. So you can see deployment cost curve here. So on the left-hand side, on the left vertical axis is the cost to capture, transport, and store 1 ton of CO2, plotted against the bottom horizontal axis, which is the volume of carbon dioxide abatement possible. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the amount, the total emissions for the US in 2017 were around 5,300 million tonnes per year, with all stationary point sources, which are the types that we're interested in, comprising 2,600 million tonnes per annum, just under half the total. So if we now look at the different colours in this chart, there's 3 phases: activation, expansion, and at-scale deployment. So at the very left-hand side, we have the current situation where we do have a number of facilities in place. So the next part, the dark blue colour, is the activation phase. That's, as I say, represented by the dark blue segment. So this is the easy wins, if you like. All you need to do in terms of that deployment is get a few clarifications on the federal tax policy and regulations. Really, the key thing, as the study leader has pointed out to the government, was to remove a big obstacle of uncertainty around investment. As we know, the less uncertainty, the more likely investors are to invest. So this could actually enable, some simple changes to regulations and tax credits could result in the US doubling its current CCUS capacity over the next 5 to 7 years, which is great. Next, the mid-blue colour, this is the expansion phase. It's a little harder to achieve because it doesn't just require agency tweaks to regulations, it actually requires Congress to act. So it needs to enhance or expand existing policies, update legal and regulatory frameworks, and increase financial incentives. So again, looking to double capacity within the next 15 years in that phase. And finally, the lighter blue colour represents the at-scale deployment phase. which would require substantial policy support in the order of $90 to $110 per tonne carbon dioxide. To continue our investment towards a 500 megatons per annum level, or potentially much more, given that you can see that the cost curve starts to flatten off at this point, a duration of the next 25 years. This curve is based on currently available technology. However, it's logical to assume that with our research and development, which is ongoing in some countries, that we should hope to look to a 10 to 30% cost improvement over time. But we can't bank that, and this is based on your conventional technologies. To give you an idea of this sort of split of cost, around 70% typically of the total cost per reference industry is the carbon capture itself, with transportation and things being much lower parts. Okay, I will move on. Right, so now a nice graphic looking at some of the upsides of deployment and outcomes. And it's not just the cost, of course. There is a lot of positive externalities here that we need to convince the public are worth doing. So you can see in this slide we've got the activation phase, the expansion phase, and the scale deployment. I'm looking at some of the benefits that could accrue by doing these. So you can see for the activation phase, we're looking at a cumulative investment of about 50 billion, which is a lot of money, potentially 10,000 jobs, and a time frame of about 5 to 7 years. Whereas at scale is a much larger situation, so almost 700 billion would be invested with around 250,000 jobs, and that's a 25-year time frame, so much more ambitious. Okay, just to summarise the key findings then, this study found that CCUS deployment and scale will mean moving from around 25 million tonnes per annum to 500 million tonnes per annum of CCUS capacity, which is equivalent to a infrastructure build-out of around 13 million barrels per day, with an incremental investment of around $700 billion and a support for around 240,000 US jobs with a GDP of 21 billion annually. Big numbers. To unlock these deployments, of course, we need to improve policies and incentives, look at regulations and legislation, and some of that will require Congress, the government, to act. Key elements of that are extending tax credit durations to around 20 years, the expansion of some of the other incentives that lower the cost of financing and attract investors. There's other tweaks that will be required. These are, for example, allowing geological storage in federal waters for all carbon dioxide sources. They also need to look at promoting large-scale pipeline infrastructure. Now, of course, that may not be something that is appealing to the US public currently, and also enabling access to storage on private land. Although we've showed that curve for the current technologies, obviously there's a lot of work going on in terms of next generation capture facilities and R&D, which hopefully should drive down the cost substantially of achieving this deployment. Of course, again, we'll need a carbon dioxide pipeline infrastructure for enhanced oil recovery and saline storage, and that's likely to be new pipelines. It's not proven that we can reuse existing pipelines. So that always needs to be developed, and of course that would need private and public support. So of course, strong collaboration between industry and government, and indeed the buy-in of the public will be vital, extremely vital. Okay, so what's the future? The great thing about this study is it's all publicly available, and it's absolutely possible to use this data as a springboard for other countries and corporations to build their own cost estimates and marginal cost curves. We or societies can execute a similar approach executed for the US government can be performed, and they can use this data that's available from the MPS as a springboard. given that I was doing a presentation for Galp Energia, I thought I might think about a suitable candidate that might be relevant to Galp. And one thing, and again, this is just purely from public domain sources, I did think perhaps the Brazilian pre-salt developments with high carbon dioxide, for example, in the Santos Basin, might be an area of interest for having these analysis done. I understand that the Jupiter field high carbon dioxide content, so it might be possible to harness clusters of fields in the Santos Basin region into a hub CCUS development. As I mentioned before, Gaffney Cline hosts a cost assessment tool, which any organisation wants to look at, and they can put their own costs in and develop cost curves. And that's the website for that is in the slide, and you can see that on the right hand side of the slide as the sort of the front page of that. Of course, not every organisation wishes to do this sort of work themselves, and clients can also request more detailed assessments of CCUS deployment from Gaffney Cline itself. I myself am doing an assessment for a client currently, so that I'm building on the NPC work for that. And one of the things that you can do is you need to develop location factors. So in terms of costs relevant in the US, you need to adjust for labour and productivity. And other elements, for example, are local procurement use. So you can take all this great work that's been done by the NPC, very detailed work, and then apply location factors, and then you can come up with your own costs, which is good. So that's really all I was planning to talk about today, but I'm very happy to answer some questions.
Jane, thank you very much for your presentation. Indeed, we have here till this moment 2 or 3 questions.
Okay, great.
When it was that most of the presentation was with data from the US. Do you see a big difference between US and Europe or even the rest of the world in this topic?
So I haven't evaluated in detail, but effectively it really is driven, the cost will be driven by a number of things. So in terms of, as I said, the biggest cost is capture. So capture, given that this will all be retrofitted, will be, say, 70% of the total cost roundabout. So there, on capture, it just comes down really to location factors. So labour costs being different. So Western Europe is probably not going to be that different in labour costs. Productivity is not that different. It might need to tweak us a little, but it's not going to be that different. So and procurement will normally be international, so it'll be so there won't be any great savings there. So I don't want to be quoted on this obviously, but I suspect in Europe the cost for capture will be similar to the US, possibly a little more. It's difficult to say. I haven't done the assessment. In terms of other aspects, storage and pipelines may be more difficult. Generally, more planning is required in Europe for pipeline development, and they tend to be more publicly controversial. So therefore, the cost may rise compared to the US, or it may not even be possible to achieve, depending on the appetite of the public for such a development. And again, gas injection into sinks. I'm not sure in Europe about the geographic availability of the aquifers, but basically, if you have aquifers, there's a good chance you can inject into those. They need to be quite deep, and the other thing they need is that they need to be quite high salinity. Otherwise, there's an issue around water usage. You don't want to use sweet water for aquifers for injection of carbon dioxide, because that's removing a potential water source for human beings. So I'd say in general, the costs on capture, just to summarise, costs on capture in Europe will be similar to the US. In the rest of the world, it will depend on labour costs, so in cheaper parts of the world, it could be cheaper. But pipelines and sinks are more contentious and challenging for me to say anything about them, and that's why you need to do an assessment.
Okay. Jane, in the previous presentation and to the previous speaker, we have a question, and I think that it applies or it fits very well in what you presented and what you are saying. And the question it was, do you see these projects being applied to new projects and facilities, or to facilities already in operation?
I think both. I think it's quite possible to retrofit storage, and indeed that cost assessment we're currently doing, and the ones in the US are all based on retrofit. But obviously it's easier to do a green field. So, in some ways at least, retrofits are easier in the sense of getting permits for it. You're just adding to an existing land take. But you can do it for both, and I don't think the costs will deviate too much. You'll need a bit more, obviously with a retrofit, you will need a bit more man hours, in terms of overall labour costs to do the work. But no, it can definitely be done for both.
Okay, and there is here also a question. I think you touched that in the presentation, but nevertheless I will do it. That is, technology exists, so these projects are possible. What is the trigger missing to put this in action?
Okay, so as I say, so you're asking about new technologies for carbon capture. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So as I said, I mentioned that all that cost curve that I showed you was based on conventional amine absorption technology. But there are, so I was having a look at what's available. I know that there's a lot of projects going on to improve this, and there is the US are doing a lot on this topic in terms of carbon capture, and they've got a number of areas that they're developing technologies. They're looking at advanced solvents, sorbents, membranes, and other novel concepts. These apply both pre and post combustion. So energy.gov gives a good overview. That's a US website, a US federal website. What really it's all about is doing things like improving the thermodynamics. It's all about driving down costs. So improving thermodynamics, efficiencies, improving kinetics, looking at how to reduce capex and improving durability. So it's all evolutionary, I think, mostly. Some of it, obviously, there must be some new options as well. But if we can drive the cost of this down 10, 20, 30%, it will make a big difference in moving this forward.
Okay. Jane, thank you so much to be with us. Thank you for your time and for sharing your views and your knowledge on this interesting topic. So thank you very much. Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye now. Thank you. Bye now.
We will now take a small recess, and we will rejoin with Paolo at 4 o'clock.
Hello, good afternoon. So it's my pleasure to introduce Paolo Delbosco. Paolo is a reservoir engineering technical solution consultant from SLB. Paolo earned a master's degree in petroleum engineering from the Polytechnic of Turin, Italy, in 2004. He has more than 15 years of experience in oil and gas industry, working for Schlumberger during the last 10 years with several clients at different locations in the advanced areas of reservoir modeling and simulation. He has a strong background in reservoir engineering and numerical simulation with a wide project experience in simulating and optimizing oil and gas reservoirs, including EOR projects. He is currently the reservoir engineering technical solution consultant for Europe. Paolo will share with us a presentation on carbon capture, utilization and storage, seamless and end-to-end reservoir solution. Before giving the stage to Paolo, I'd like to remind everyone that we have a chat where we can put questions that will be answered at the end of this session by Paolo. So, Paolo, thank you very much to be with us. It's a pleasure, and the room is yours. Thank you.
All right. So just, can you hear me, right, Daniel?
Right. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you, Daniel, for the introduction, and thank you, Galp, to give me the opportunity to be here this year remotely to this Galp Open Days. So today, as Daniel has anticipated, I'm going to talk about carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and I will bring you what is our experience in Schlumberger around this topic. So I have prepared the following agenda that we are going to see together today in the next 30 minutes. So before starting, I will give you a little bit of background around the CO2. I think is important to be all in the same page. And then I will let you know what kind of experience we have in Schlumberger and what kind of experience we can bring in around the CO2 storage, the importance of integrated workflows. I will talk about few case studies, some relevant case studies from projects that we have been participated worldwide, and then conclusion. All right. So let's start. So here in the next slide, in this introduction, my intention is not really to give you a complete summary of everything you need to know around CO2 or climate changing or anything like that. But I would like just to give you some statistics around the CO2, which are important also to understand some of the aspects that we are going to talk in a moment. So the first point here is that CO2 actually is essential for our life, and if there was no CO2, life on Earth as we know, would not exist, right? So the CO2 is a source of food through photosynthesis in plants and there always been CO2 in atmosphere, and this is the result of this change between the atmosphere, land, and ocean in the so-called carbon cycle. But if you look at the CO2 in terms of percentage with respect to other gases in the dry atmosphere, actually there is not that much of it in the atmosphere. If you look at the small little table I have put in the slide on the right side, you can see that in volume we are talking about 0.05% of CO2 in the dry air, right? So why we are interested in the CO2 now? Well, we are interested in the CO2 because it's what they call a greenhouse gas, which means that these gases are has an influence on the climate, right? In fact, the average surface temperature of Earth is about 15 centigrade, and without the global warming would be about minus 18 centigrades, okay? And there are various gases, not only CO2, which are influencing the warming, okay? Including things like water vapor, as well as what we call greenhouse gases, okay? So there are also something that you can get in the atmosphere that can have a cooling effect, and this is what we call aerosols, right? Means things like liquid or solid particle. So the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is increasing, and this is mainly due to human activities such as burning fuel and industrial processes. So what you see in the slide now at the bottom, you can see a nice plot which is showing the concentration of the approximate carbon dioxide concentration, okay, from 80,000 years ago up to today, okay. So the information here is coming from it was measured in the ice, okay. And then on the second plot on the right, what you see is over the last 15 years, okay, sorry, just very limited time frame. You see what happened in the last 15 years. There has been an increase of temperature over this period, and this is definitely the effect of an increase of the CO2 in the atmosphere. In fact, in the original concentration back in what was regarded as the beginning of the industrial areas, so it was around 70-50. The CO2 concentration in atmosphere was only 290 parts per million, and the recent statistics are showing that we are already reaching or even exceeding 450 parts per million. Okay, so we need to have in mind that a part per million of CO2 equates to about 2.0 gigaton of carbon, or 7.8 gigaton of CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay, so these are the number. Okay, and this is now we have to think about where this is coming and what would happen if we can store this. So people now, as we are seeing, are looking different way to mitigate the carbon emission. And this is becoming increasingly interesting in the carbon capture, utilization, and storage as one of the possible way to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And also the latest statement from the organizations such as the World Energy Agency has included that this the CCUS is really important to meet future emission targets. We need to capture CO2 from gas production, coal-fired power station, and other industrial sources. Of course, carbon capture, utilization, and storage is not going to be enough, okay? But we need to complement with other measures like the one you see in the slide, such as improved efficiency, renewable fuel switching, and nuclear power. So if you look now at the top plot here in my slide, this is coming from the IEA World Energy Outlook 2019. Basically, what is showing what are the expectations from the different way of reducing the emission. And what you see here is that there is an expectation of that the carbon capture, utilization, and storage is going to take 90% of the CO2. So basically, it sounds like not very much, right? But without that, let's say 10%, okay, we are not going to be able to meet the target expected by 2050. So the question now is how much CO2 can be stored, right? So here again, if we look at the number, we are just talking about gigaton of CO2 in the atmospheres. In the table below, you see just some example of current projects, okay? And these current projects are capturing only about 35 megaton per year, okay? This is, as you can imagine, this is really a relative small amount. And some of the future scenario are talking about capturing anything between 1 to 5 gigaton per year. Okay, this of course is an ambitious plan. Okay, and to have a success with ambitious plan, we need to is not possible without any kind of economic incentive of legislation. we need to, however, due to all the initiative on the climate change that are happening now, we see much more support for carbon capture and storage than there was in a few years ago. Here are some examples just to mention. UK has announced they want to have a net zero target free emission. Other companies such as ADNOC and DNI have signed recently an agreement on carbon capture, utilization and storage, and Total and other companies are also collaborating on this. So there is a lot of initiative around carbon capture, storage, utilization and storage. So in Schlumberger we are a leader in all the technologies which are important for running a CO2 storage project, including things like integrated services and technology for selection, construction, operation, monitoring on the site. But not only that, we have expertise on site identification, appraisal, drilling, well construction, site operation, monitoring, and verification. And also, multidisciplinary studies are needed, and we will see today some key element of this, because are needed to do things like geology, geochemistry, geomechanics, and dynamic flow behavior. Okay, so all of these come together to understand what is happening, what will happen in the underground. And here there is a huge area of uncertainty, and therefore also considering uncertainty and risk analysis is important. So in Schlumberger we have gained experience in participating in several CO2 projects worldwide, including here you have some example: Norway, Algeria, Australia, and US. So I will give you more detail on some of them. And the picture that you have here in this slide is coming exactly from a CO2 facility in the US, where we are extracting and pumping CO2 for ARR projects. So reservoir study, as I said, is one of the elements which are we need to take into account when we do a CO2 storage project. And this is in this slide you see some of the things that we need to take into account. Okay, some of them are obvious, so reservoir parameters such as temperature, salinity, permeability, residual gas saturation, and the shape of the reservoir, because it can make the difference how the CO2 will move. And we also need to think about physical and chemical effects such as solubility, geochemistry, hysteresis, and also if we need to have an equation of state or a phase calculation for phase behavior. We need to think about the boundary conditions and also the way the grid is designed, right? So the grid has to be designed and has to be fine enough to capture the CO2 behavior. We need to be able to model aquifer, the well model, and also reservoir integrity and geomechanical behavior are paramount for a CO2 storage, and then we will see why. And of course, we need to look at the operating strategy. Okay, so what is the most effective way to inject it? Okay, maybe alternating with gas is also a good approach. And what are the surface facility constraints? And lately is also how this is going to be monitored. Okay, so most of the things that you see in these slides, probably all of us is familiar because in any way, in any oil and gas project, we look at this Here with the CO2, we have some additional complexity. One is represented by the physics. We have more complex physics and the chemistry. And also we have a complexity because we have much more greater uncertainties, okay? Because normally where you are injecting in something which is relatively unknown. So in Schlumberger we have quite a lot of experience in reservoir simulation for carbon capture and storage. We can model really different kind of scenarios, such as storage in saline aquifer, storage in depleted oil and or gas reservoir, or even for enhanced oil or gas recovery, EOR or EGR. And by doing a reservoir simulation, you can start to answer some of the key questions like how much CO2 can I store? Can a storage style hold, for example, or what injection rates are possible, or what are the risks of CO2 leakage? Okay, so a lot of special features needed in the CO2 model. It's got multi-phase behavior, complex physics and chemistry, and also is necessary. Necessary for you to consider the way the simulator works over very long time scales. Okay, because you will think about injecting CO2 for a period of the year, and then you need to see what happens if this is left in the underground, in the storage side, for 100 or 1,000 of years after that. So all of these things are interesting and are challenging topics. And in Schlumberger we have different option here for simulating the CO2. And this is really a growing up facility that have been increased over the history. In a way, there are now multiple and different ways that you can build a reservoir simulation model. So one of the simplest option is to use a black hole approximation, where you can use three phases with the CO2 represented as a gas or a solvent, or you can use two phases where you can treat CO2 as gas and water as oil. And you will see that we have been quite successful. There is a few projects with some interesting reporting coming out of there using this kind of simplified approach. If you are going to use the black hole approximation, you can use any simulator in our bookshelf, from Eclipse, Intersect, and from Sim. However, this simple approach is not necessarily going to tell you that much about the geochemistry effect, for example, or what is going to happen on the long-term behavior with the CO2. So in this case, we need to go for a compositional formulation of the model. And here we have, as I said, we have developed several options for tackling different kind of geological sites. So we have CO2 store for geological storage in aquifer. We have gas watt for depleted gas reservoir or aquifer, and we have CO2 soil, which is specifically being developed for depleted oil reservoir. And alongside with this different reservoir option, we need also to think about potentially integrating workflow with geomechanics, geochemistry, and with surface network. So this is about Eclipse. Also Intersect, our high-resolution simulator, which is extremely powerful compositional option for gas EOR. You have option for miscible CO2 and wax flood. You have CO2 solubility in an aqueous phase. And considering that you have to model aquifer with a lot of uncertainty, you can take advantages of the advanced gridding option that we have in Intersect for really capture complex structure. And you can take advantages from the state-of-the-art of the linear solver and the parallelization to run high-resolution model and also to run multiple parallelization of those models. So in terms of development for Intersect, we are working to making more on the chemical reaction, including solid phase, and we are developing specific CO2 storage feature. And with Intersect, we have also Intersect can be coupled with our geomechanical simulator, and this is coming with the integrated workflow. But also we have the sensibility of Intersect to consider the geochemistry and the integration with geomechanical simulator. So the integrated workflow is something extremely paramount, and this is something we can bring in the context of CO2 storage project. One of the aspects we can bring here is the uncertainty and the optimization, which is very important. As we are already seeing, there is a lot of uncertainty in the CO2, and Petrel and Maple workflows can be applied here. So where we are looking at some of the uncertainties like capacity, injectivity, and containment, which depends on all of sort of parameter in the model. So looking at the challenges like limited subsurface characterization data. So if you are injecting, for example, into a deep saline aquifer, you don't have any production history, and you can also have very limited knowledge what is actually like to be happening in there. And another aspect that we have to have in mind is that there is no that much extensive CO2 worldwide project. Okay, so there are not very much other analog gas you can compare. So there is really a lot of uncertainty that we need to take into account, and there is also uncertainty in terms of there is also the need to quantify long-term risks. Okay, which are really completely unknown sometimes, and you also need to look at even in the short terms. Okay. And you need to think like uncertainty about what we are going to measure, okay? Because that really can affect how you design your monitoring program, for example. So the picture here I put on the right are probability maps generated by a simulator, and these maps can be used for various purposes. Those maps were originally developed for looking at the CO2 evolution in order to design for the seismic monitoring. This one you see on the top right is basically showing the probability of having more than 5% CO2 saturation after 3 years. And the nice aerial view that you have on the bottom is showing the same probability of having 5% saturation, but after 15 years. Okay, so this kind of so in this case, it's very nice to have this visual tool for getting an idea what might happen. Another important aspect that we have to consider in this vision of integrated workflow is the geomechanics. So we cannot skip the geomechanical aspect. Because it is really important. So our simulator can couple with petrogeomechanics and visage, and here you can really investigate the impact of CO2 injection on pressure and stress. So because in this project you need to look at things like the risk of caprock failure, or possibly fault reactivation. And also, you might need to consider that the seal that you have for a natural gas, it might not be work also for CO2, because the CO2 in its gaseous phase, it might much denser than methane. So the geomechanical aspect is crucial.
Paul, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Another important element here that we need to take into consideration is the integrated asset modeling. Okay, so because we are not just interested in what is happening in the physics and the chemistry in the reservoir, but also how do you get the CO2 to the reservoir. Okay, so you can actually find a good site for injecting CO2. But then you have to get the CO2 there. Okay, so maybe the field is an ideal site, but you don't have pipeline for mile around, and the source is very distant, and this can really make a huge difference to whatever the project is feasible or not. And in Schlumberger we do have technology and expertise also to address all these aspects, because also the subsurface, also the surface element is crucial for a CO2 storage project. So case studies, some example. Here you have some example in the North America where we have been working typically in integrated projects. So you see we have experience in saline aquifer. Just to mention two important projects: Aquistore project in the U.S. and Decatur project in Illinois base. But you see here we have also experience in CO2 EOR and storage in Canada and in Texas. So now moving to Europe, we have been involved in many projects. Okay, so just to mention, this one is in this project we have been involved in the early stage, and this is in the North Sea, is Leipner. Leipner was operated by Statoil and for now Equinor and his partner, and this was really the first commercial CO2 capture storage project where they were injecting CO2 from Sleipner field into a series of formation below where the CO2 is disposed. So what you can see here from the plot on the right, what is showing is the time-lapse seismic CO2 plume evolving, and this is a successful example for the seismic for monitoring. So in this project, Schlumberger was involved in data analysis, CO2 monitoring, and simulation workflow. Another example is this in Germany. So it is in Germany. They were injecting CO2 for 5 years. So now are in the post-injection monitoring. So we have participated in the consortium of this project, and we have been involved in the modeling, risk analysis, operation, and monitoring. Another example is in Australia. So in Australia, we are talking about a depleted gas reservoir, and in the example, we have been extensively involved in the reservoir simulation study. So we have been able to match the dynamic behavior based on the monitoring measurement. We have been able to predict the CO2 plume migration and dissolution, and we have been able to identify all the influential parameters. Okay, so that was my last case. So I think we are almost on time. So for the conclusion, so as you can see, Schlumberger has experience. We have gained experience in all the aspects of CO2 storage, and this was thanks to the experience that we have gained in participating in some of the industry leading projects. Simulation is a key tool for understanding the complexity and the uncertainty of the CO2 project, but only reservoir simulation is not sufficient. Okay, so we need this has to be part of a multidisciplinary collaborative study where we need really to make sure that we are looking at the integration. Because integration, workflow, and digital solution are really needed here to support any CO2 initiative at every stage. So that's all from my side. So I think I close on time.
Okay,
Daniel?
Paolo. Yes, thank you very much. You closed just on time, and unfortunately we do not have time to have some questions. Because we have another speaker in 2 minutes or 1 minute and a half. So thank you so much for being with us, for your time, for sharing your views, your experience, and all those cases, and to share your knowledge with us. So thank you so much, and stay safe in these difficult times for all of us. And thank you to be with us once again. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you, Galp, for letting me presenting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.
Obrigado. Thank you. Bye bye.
And it's my pleasure to present you Thomas Fontfreyde from Genesis. Thomas is a specialist technical service manager in Genesis, France, leading a team of experts in flow assurance, CFD, materials, process and technical safety. He is also Deputy Country Manager for France and European Union countries. After an engineering degree in industrial energetics and a PhD on multi-phase flows, he works for aerospace industry and then moves to oil and gas. For the last 15 years, he occupied positions in upstream business as flow assurance specialist, lead engineer, and manager in ASRG, Subsea 7, and now Genesis since 2014. Thomas has a multidisciplinary vision and long expertise in the energy industry that is now applying to the service of energy transition, and therefore will do a presentation on carbon footprint with Genesis carbon assessment tools. Know your size, make good choices. So before I give the floor to Thomas, I would like to remind everyone in the audience that you can do questions that will be answered at the end by Thomas. To do that, you have in the right side of your screen the possibility to do that. Thomas, thank you so much to be here. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you. And now the room is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? It's fine?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Oops. Is it okay? So do you see my screen correctly?
Yes, I'm seeing your screen. Yes, perfect.
So far, so good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for attending. I'm the last one for the day, so it's not necessarily easy to close out, but try to keep you motivated in this presentation on the carbon footprint assessment. So let's start by the introduction.
We'll do
it. Yeah, hopefully. That's the introduction on why we're here today. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I think you all know this curve with the carbon emission and the total emission that had a peak in 2020. So just now we are a bit lower thanks to coronavirus. Is probably only good positive thing from this. But clearly everyone now knows the necessity to reduce carbon footprints, and especially after the COP21 objectives. Galp, what I found from you, Galp, is that the development of your company is now low carbon profile with significant investment in renewables. And in particular, you fixed some internal price for carbon. So I found on your website $50 per ton, which is very, very interesting because all the new transition needs some value against it, and it has to come from this cost to support the full project. Us in Genesis, so we recognize that the carbon emissions are now a major driver for new energy development. But more than the net zero targets are very good. The question more is how do you go there? What is the path to reach it? And we believe in what we call carbon conscious choices. So how quantitatively you can define how much carbon you want to put in and how you reduce it and optimize it. So that's kind of introduction. So for just Genesis, for those who don't know us, so we're a consultancy engineering company, worldwide place with more than 900 people. We've been around for more than 30 years, so it's quite. I hope that most of you know this. But our key focus is on clients, and we put a lot of focus on the satisfaction survey that we've got here with a 9 out of 10 for last year. We're very proud of that. And what we saw from our clients is clearly that the energy is changing. So we try to follow this energy. If we think most of people knows Genesis for oil and gas and for upstream oil and gas more precisely. Actually, over the last 15 years, we delivered quite a lot of projects on what now is called energy transition. It was not badged like this before, but if you look at this map, it's just a few examples, but just to show you that since early 2000, so for the example, this job I started in 2006, we've been working on energy transition, and not only on one single topic, but on all of them, basically from wind farms to wave energy. Of course, high focus on carbon and CCUS, that has been main thing, but also in electrification on platform, for example, which was something that initially was badged as more redevelopment, but clearly now with I would say emission optimization can be considered as energy transition. So all that together, idea is to try to work on this path to a cleaner overall energy world. So now what we do in terms of globally in terms of carbon assessment. So the idea is to try to calculate carbon footprint. So I don't know if all of you have ever heard about that, but the concept is to try to put a weight in terms of carbon value against some particular developments. Usually what is done is that it's done in different phases, but most of the time in detailed design, and for the time being still linked with regulation. So not all companies do that on their own will, but sometimes it's more forced by governments. And what we think is that this carbon will be opportunities for a lot of companies in a very short future. So we want to force and support the carbon conscious choices. what we had in mind is that when you look at the different, this I think you all know this curve, which is the value of project in function of the development of project time. So from the very initial concepts, select definition, you think, to the overall development, and after they put in production. This curve is known as a value prediction. So just showing that you create more value if you think at the very early in the project when you select your concept, and you can go on a very good path. Whereas despite a very good execution, for example, the value of your project will be always lower if you took the wrong path at the beginning. So for the last few years, we thought about that, and we tried to transfer this to a more carbon footprint assessment point of view, and we figured out that actually the exact reverse curve is existing with the carbon emission control for the different phases of projects. So if you start from one development, at the very early stage identification, you will have much more ability to basically reduce drastically the carbon emission if you make a right design. And also at the very end when you may have an execution, but the big trend will be defined here. And how we found out that it was very interesting for Genesis is because these early phases is exactly where Genesis called front-end and ultra-front-end, where we're working. So when you've got a multiple of different concepts, different architectures, different developments, and you have to pick up among all of them the best one, the one that will give you the best value. And now what we think is that in this value, the carbon emission should be one. What is interesting also from this is that we are also a lot involved in what we call brownfield and redevelopments, and that's where you've got multiple options and multiple selections to do, and the comparison of the different carbon footprint is very, very key in this area also of the projects. So what we've done from that, then from this kind of conclusions, we said we need to develop our own tool. We need to use our knowledge from front end and from brownfield and try to put that in one dedicated software that can help the overall industry. So it's coming, and it's called Gen-CATTM. That has been released a few months ago, and I'm very happy to be there to present you this first I would say information on it. I'm not sure that anyone has seen that in the world, so you are the very, very first probably to see those slides. So just to come back from the beginning, so this Gen-CATTM tool is using the greenhouse gas protocol scopes. I could not attend the previous presentation from today, sadly, because of the technical problem, but I think most of you now are aware of this different sorting, and that's Gen-CATTM is based on this calculation. So we sort the emissions of carbon among three scopes. So scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1 is what we call the direct emissions. So what is coming directly from the development, which could be, of course, the flaring, the venting. It could be also, of course, the turbines and anything that is coming from the combustion. But it can be also some logistics when the companies are owning their own flagship. So very important that all this description is coming from the operator point of view. So every single company has its own view of those scopes. And what we found most useful is to try to force ourselves to be at the place of the operators, because they are the ones that are in control of a lot of those emissions. So if we go from scope 1 to scope 2, it's what we call purchase energy, so more anything that is imported. It can be coal, gas, biofuel, whatever. It can be direct power also. And finally, the scope 3 is all the indirect emissions, so anything to do with upstream, the construction or whatever, and also in the downstream, more the utilization of the energy itself. So the Gen-CATTM is using and looking at all those different sources and trying to control all the different emissions by calculating them. So Gen-CATTM is coming from Genesis Carbon Assessment Tool, so that's a kind of name that we define, and we've spent the last few years trying to work on it with some very key features that we wanted to provide to the customers. One, it has to be usable for all developments. So we wanted something that was not only something for new assets, but also able to be applied for existing assets. That was very important because we believe, we'll come back later on that, but we believe that the brownfield is also a big target for that. And it can deliver some carbon intensity evaluation. We want clear answers. So the idea of Gen-CATTM is to give comparative metrics. So it's, of course, giving you a value in terms of weight of carbon of your project, but it's also, and even more important, especially at early phases, to be able to compare apples with apples on different concepts and projects. And that's very important for us, as we saw just a bit ahead in the presentation, that it has to be applicable for all phases of project. Most of the tools now are developed to be able to be applied more detailed design, so when everything is frozen and you've got information of everything. What we wanted is to be able to make this quantification of the carbon emission when it's very valuable, which is very, for us, early in concept selects. Finally, we wanted to have a very large application range. So we are an oil and gas company, but we're also working on energy transition. So we wanted to have a tool that can be derived, can be flexible enough to allow you to go from one type of project to another. So what does it look like? I won't go into too much detail because in 20 minutes it's just impossible. So if you got any questions, please drop them, or I will try to answer them at the end, or we'll probably set up different calls if some people are very interested in the details. But the idea is, like many other software, we try to provide some inputs. Here the inputs can be very light or very detailed. That's one of the key things, and we'll come back later. But it mainly the fuel consumptions, compositions, the equipment lists, production profiles, flaring, venting, logistics, consumable, all the things that can be used for assessing the emissions. Gen-CAT is just then calculating the scope 1 and 3, and mainly the upstream of scope 3. So we have not developed the full scope 3 downstream calculation, and it's mainly because it's very, very variable depending on clients. But we have a lot of flexibility in there to add whatever we want. As I said, based on greenhouse gas protocol, and we are just inbuilt emission factors and discipline expertise allowing to make those calculations. And we've got something that is very, very interesting, that we made some kind of connections with our field development tools, Adept. So that is also another product from Genesis. And linked together, it means that for all the field developments now we are calculating, we can apply this carbon footprint calculation, and it gives very, very quick results. I will come back to that later. In terms of outputs, it gives, of course, the carbon footprint, so split it between different scopes. It gives also the breakdown of the different contributors. Is your flaring basically representing most part of it? Is it your power consumption? Or yeah, you've got an issue there, you should just work on this. And very, very interestingly, which is a differentiator from other carbon footprint tools, that we give some annual footprint, not only something that is frozen with one single value, but something that evolves with time also, depending on the different operating philosophy. And that's where the production profile and the flaring philosophy are very important, because you can see how it evolves over time. I will show you an example a bit later in the presentation. So why Gen-CAT is a bit different? So in terms of positioning, I think this is probably the key basis, that you've got generally two ways to calculate those things. Either with totally factorized estimation, but most of the time it's too high level, and you don't have enough details to make some proper flexibility in your calculation. Or on the other side, what is used commonly on projects is more MTO based, where you have to enter any parts and pieces of your system, very, very detailed. Every time you got not enough inputs, you just stuck, and of course it's very time consuming. So the idea was to try to get the best of them. So we can calculate factorized factors from Gen-CAT, and we can also input MTOs. So it gives you a very, very quick generation of the differentiators and different comparative calculations. So it's something that is also quite easy to manage. You don't need some very specific expertise from environmental disciplines or similar stuff. You can calculate it yourself, and it gives some very, very calculation time efficiency. Because we have also full hand on the software, we can have a very high clarity on the contributors, and we can drill into details whenever we want. Very, very important, the production profiles, the fact that we can enter consumption of and factor of time is also a key. And we can match specifically on needs, because we put flexibility in almost every parameter. So we have inbuilt things, but we also can change them by hand. Last things, but not the least, is that we have now a platform called UFE, which is ultra front-end platform that allows to have direct connection of the clients to a platform where the clients can get themselves their own results based on the calculation we do, allowing them to see themselves the results. And it's improving the knowledge of the scope. It's improving the comparisons of the metrics, and it's giving a very, very good value for the clients. What else is different from Gen-CAT? We made some specific development from brownfield because we found that actually there are a lot of new developments, but there are much more existing assets that need to have some carbon, I would say, optimization. And what we found very useful is to be able to benchmark an asset. So we developed some standard listing of inputs needed for Gen-CAT that can be applicable for any asset, any development, and we can provide those templates to be able to fielded very quickly. And from that, we can develop some tuned reports that are adapted to actual asset, and then be able to predict much more accurately the emission in the next years, depending on the changes and the evolutions. We can also have some quick fixes. So as Gen-CAT is a very quick software, we can have some just look on the flare optimization, some optimization of the logistics, or looking at the different fuels, for example, on the platform to see what impact it can have on the carbon footprint. And finally, what we found very, very useful also, that when you couple that with a techno-economic assessment, it gives you an overall picture of the full life cycle, and that's very important to know with those small changes if they are valuable or not. And if we come back to the different value of the project, often it's more opportunistic. But if you can show also that you're reducing your carbon footprint, the value of the project can increase quite a lot depending on the different politics. So I know that's very quick, but I cannot go too much into detail. So just wanted to use the last 5 minutes to show you a few examples of what it looks like. So the first one is on the concept selection. So this is a comparison we made on different cases. So from, I would say, the reference case on an offshore development, where we had some initial case with a CPF offshore from few drilling centers going onshore. And we made a couple of alternatives with an onshore only with a gathering manifold subsea. Different between case 1 and case 2 was just electric drive on the gas turbine. And the case 3 is different because you just import the current from onshore instead of generating it with a production. We had very limited data, and it was supposed to support the overall concept selection of the different architectures. So just on the right top corner, you see the different results in terms of overall footprint with the split between scopes 1, 2, and 3. So what you see on scope 3, on case 3, that of course the scope 2 is appearing there because we are importing some current from onshore, and that's the main difference. Other difference that if you look at the top at the bottom right, it's the same results but split it by contributor. You see that there is no generation in blue for the case 3 because everything is imported. What is interesting from there that if you look at the pure capex, actually the case 3 is the cheapest. So we could say, yeah, let's go for that. But when you look at the overall OPEX, actually no, it's case 1 that is cheaper. So you could say, yeah, why not doing that? Just go for case 1. But then if you add the emission, you see that the case 1 is about 10% more higher emission in terms of CO2. If you start introducing a carbon tax, exactly like Galp start doing on their project, then the case 2 could be much more attractive depending on the value of this carbon tax, and you can calculate break-even value for this tax to make this project actually much more economic. So the question that comes immediately after this kind of concept review is that carbon taxes are now introduced all over the world by companies directly or by governments. And if you start neglecting the calculation of the carbon footprint in your initial developments and at early phase in the project, how can you have the actual real picture of the value of the project and the actual cost? So it's really showing that you need to have an assessment of this carbon footprint very early. And now by default we're doing that for any new field development we have, or any brownfield modification. We propose to our client to have this carbon footprint assessment to give the real overall picture. Second example, I think we've got one more slide. Yeah, just to illustrate the kind of change over time. That Gen-CAT is able to deliver. So this is the consumption and actual footprint of the different contributors versus time. So this is very interesting because you can see that depending on the different cases, a different option, you can have very, very different shapes and different contributors over time. And this can drive you totally from the different initial case assumptions where you want to optimize maybe for end of field life some of the contributors and think about the development and the design you have thought for those end of field life cases. So this is giving me the perfect transition to the next cases, which is looking to a facility. It's a sulfur production plant onshore. When we had a chance to look at this job in terms of redevelopment. And the idea was to try to see from carbon footprint point of view what could be done there. And we started with quite detailed mechanical inputs, and we had very, very, very accurate information about the turndowns and power factors of the different plants. So we had made a first assessment by the, I would say, normal standard methods performed by environmental team of Genesis. And we tried to refine this by using Gen-CAT, this time by applying very detailed production profile, but also adding the constraints we have on these compressors. For example, here you had a lot of carbon emitted by the compressors. So we added constraints in terms of number of compressor running and in terms of minimum turndown you needed. And what you see that, of course, for an early field life, everything is producing full speed, but at the end, you got some limitation on what you actually need, which is forcing you actually to use 2 compressors, even if in theory you should only need 1.1 or whatever. So this combined is giving an interesting calculation, and when we added that a lot together with the actual calculation, so we show that with Gen-CAT that actually for end of field life, the normal conventional method was actually not conservative and was underestimating the consumption, the carbon emission. So very interesting that we did this calculation in literally 3 times less time than needed initially, because we could, and because of this, we could run multiple different scenarios with depending on the actual connections with the compressors and the maintenance also that is done. So this is illustrating also that you need to have some accurate time factors in your carbon assessment if you want to really see the real picture. So I'm already at 20 minutes, so I'm arriving to the conclusion. So it's pretty quick. I cannot go into too much detail, as I said, and cannot give you too many examples. But hopefully it will be just a first flavor for you. And what I would like you to take away from this presentation are 4 main points. So of course the climate is changing. So that's, I think we all know that now. It's done. It's recognized. Most countries, population, industries are facing that as a risk, but it's also an opportunity depending on how you look at it. Most operators are defining tangible targets, so it's good. The industry is moving to this kind of low carbon profiles for new assets, but also there is an increasing urgency for the carbon intensity of the existing operations. And the carbon intensity is something that Gen-CAT is calculating. So how much basically carbon you emit for your barrel of oil or your scuff of gas. And that's probably one of the big paths for the net zero carbon in the short future. We as Genesis literally took that and say, okay, we need to develop something specific that will give some specific capabilities. And what we want is to give the maximum value of the calculation, most efficient. And it's clearly at early stages in redevelopment. And the full Gen-CAT software has been developed in this idea to try to be able to make the most impact. And the end, what we would like ahead of Gen-CAT is to ensure that the carbon conscious choices are made, because now all those calculations, all the softwares are good, but what is very clear is that there is this net carbon targets. We need to go there, and there are risks, but there are also opportunities for some of the projects, specifically with carbon taxes going in the game. And for sure, in the short futures, all this will have to be self-paid, and we really believe that these carbon conscious choices can make the difference. Thank you very much for your time. I've been a bit long, but if you got any question, I will take them with pleasure.
Thomas, thank you very much for this very interesting first flavor of this tool. It looks, for me at least, very interesting, and I am very curious on several aspects. But I will put only 2 questions, if you allow me.
Yeah, of course.
First of all, the way to calculate CO2 equivalent, currently it's not uniform among the industry for several reasons. What is the implication of this in your tool?
So
because you will form everything. If all the industry uses this tool, it will be uniform. But in reality, we know it isn't.
No. So the way it's captures in Gen-CAT is that any development is very specific, and we have basically the calculation of the emission factor that is the key of all that, and also the different consumptions of for example of fuels and this kind of things. So what we had in the tool is a kind of localization definition. Of course, where is the project, where the materials are coming from, where the energy is coming from. But we added also a lot of flexibility in the factors to allow some specific, I would say, tweaking of the numbers for specific cases. For example, if you are in the US, for sure the gas as not the same kind of emitting factor than I would say in the middle of Mozambique, in the middle of nowhere. And all that is added in the software specifically for each case. Basically, each case has its own specificity. We also tended to use as much as possible clients' rules and sometimes input with that respect, because we have some clients that have very clear views and already defined numbers, so we can force the numbers in the software based on that. And if not, we usually try to have a workshop at the very beginning of all those developments where we review all the assumptions one by one. And I would say in Gen-CAT you got less than in the normal carbon footprint tools, and try to show what would be the best, I would say, best assessment that can be given, because for sure it's all about it's very, very specific, and two people calculating the same carbon footprints may not have the same answer. However, how we see the power of this tool is, I would say, more in terms of comparison of the same option, of optionality of the same developments. And in that case, you have to be smart and look carefully on the different options and the inputs, and just figure out what will be comparable between the different options and what will not. And that's where it's very, very important to have the knowledge of the different say contributors and the different aspects. I don't know if I'm answering correctly your question.
Yeah. Thomas, one last question, and we are running out of time. Do you see this tool? I understand that this tool can be useful either in new projects, and as you said, early is best, but also on existing facilities. According with your experience, where do you see the biggest advantage of this? In the early projects or in the existing ones?
So that's a very good question, and I think there is a bit of faith there, and I would say will to see the path. If you look at the I would say brownfield developments, could argue that it's very complicated to make the changes, and you will not redesign the full platforms and the full plants you've got onshore. It's very complicated. However, with small studies, as I said, just to give you an example, a calculation on normal carbon footprint calculation is usually months. You talk about 3, 4, 5 weeks. If it's not too complicated, I would say very easily we talk about months. What we see with Gen-CAT is that we're able to deliver some carbon footprint assessment in days or weeks, meaning that we can just look at very quick fixes. So I would say for brownfield, you can have quick fixes that will give you small steps, but you can have many, many of them, small step plus small steps. On the contrary, with I would say greenfield and the new development, you may have big impact because you can change totally the architecture and halve all the carbon emission. After it will be one-off. So you see that in the new world, the new development may not be so numerous because of the crisis. So it may be more effective in short term to look at the brownfield and try to have some small improvements, but a lot of them, and probably in the same times on any new development to apply this kind of carbon conscious choices selection and think about what you're doing in terms of carbon footprint to make quick, very big wins. So probably both are very, very important. Some are small steps, other are big steps, but less. I think at the end it's probably both are needed, especially if you want to go to net zero carbon.
Yeah, I would say they are complementary, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas, thank you so much to be with us, for your time and for sharing this new tool. So thank you so much.
Don't hesitate if you've got any questions. Yeah.
Yes,
bye-bye.
We'll drop the bye-bye in email. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care.